You are listening to Cemetery Confessions, the world's #1 goth talk podcast.
Hello, and welcome back to Cemetery Confessions. Many of us have had the experience of an unexpected smell, or sound, or visual that instantly transported us back to our formative years, and we reflect upon this golden era with fondness. The world seemed simpler, our body and mind were more full of wonder and energy. Perhaps you can remember a song or an album that completely changed your perspective on what was possible, that opened your mind to new possibilities and horizons. Well, on this episode, we will be revisiting 4 albums, each of which played some role in making us who we are today. The funny thing about nostalgia and rose-colored glasses, however, is sometimes those memories just don't hold up. You pop on your favorite TV show that you watched as a kid and realize the plots are mostly predictable filler and bad animation. You listen to an album that shook your world only to realize you've heard those guitar riffs ad nauseum on other albums for the last 20 years. Or in my case, you realize that Christian rock band you loved so much and thought was so novel and creative was actually just incredibly derivative of a different band you hadn't heard before. It can be emotionally difficult to realize something that was so important to you as a kid is mostly smoke and mirrors, substanceless tripe. But it can also be deeply emotionally meaningful to transport yourself back to this reconstructed version of yourself. Our focus today will be on goth-adjacent albums that played an important role in our younger selves that we haven't revisited in a long time. We'll be discussing the merits and demerits of each album and asking ourselves, what is it that draws us to goth-adjacent music? What aspects of the goth genre are lacking a special something that we can get somewhere else? And we'll be getting some incisive commentary about the nuances of music history and production. On the docket today is an album from Zombie Ghost Train, Black Sabbath, Blutengel, and Hednagarna. As always, I am your host, Danny Ashes, and I'm here with my co-host, Trey. Our 2 guests this episode are Azzy Batts of Obscura Undead and Ryan Flint of the band Witch Hands and the oddities and clothing shop Arbitrarium. Let's actually get right into the episode and start talking about our first album, which is titled Dealing the Death Card by Zombie Ghost Train. Azzy, this is your pick for the episode. Can you introduce us to the band and give us a little bit of a backstory on your relationship to this album?
Step into my coffin, a world of lost and sin. Climb into my casket, scandalize the skin. Step into my coffin, the passion draws you in. The past is not the future, life does not exist. I'll take you to the other side of a place you've never been. Skeletons locked in, lost devouring the sin. Step into my coffin, let the feast begin. You'll be my dark angel, my skeleton with skin. Step into the velvet, feel the passion breathe, burning desire, fruit from the devil's tree. I'll take you to the other side, a place you've never been. Skeletons locked in lust, devouring the sin. I'll take you to the other side, a place you've never been. in lust, devouring the sin. I'll take you to the other side, a place you've never been. Skeletons locked in lust, devouring the sin. Step into the shadows, the bliss of wickedness. I'll leave you barely breathing, a little twisted temptress. Step into my coffin, let the sin begin. Two creatures locked in lust, let the skin on skin begin. I'll take you to the other side of a place you've never been. Skeletons locked in lust, devouring the sin. I'll take you to the other side, a place you've never been. Skeletons locked in lust, devouring the sin.
So the band that I picked was Zombie Ghost Train. This band only has 2 studio albums, and I picked the second and last studio album, which was Dealing the Death Card. They are a psychobilly band from Australia, and they didn't really last all that long. They were together for, I think, 6 years in sort of the mid-aughts. But during that time, they did get a lot of attention, and I believe that they also toured in the United States, and I don't remember if they toured in Europe, but they did worldwide touring in such a short amount of time. And a big part of that was because their stage show and their music videos highlight these really campy, kind of thrown together sets and like horror movie sets, like schlock, like just the worst horror movie sets.
I
And
definitely
their
checked out
aesthetic,
some of their stuff, their videos and their live footage.
yeah, and their aesthetic was very much like Teddy Boy aesthetic with zombie makeup. So
And the
they
huge
would
epic pompadours.
huge epic pompadours and the giant ass draped jackets.
So
Yep. Did Australia have teddy boys?
Apparently.
Well,
I've just never heard of them outside of Britain, strictly speaking.
Considering we have the internet now, it may have been a post, Inception era.
Yeah, I mean, the band came out well past the Teddy Boy era.
Oh yeah.
Oh, I thought they were all zombies.
I mean, that is fair. That is fair.
When I was trying to find some basic information on this band, because what I just told you all is the limit and extent of my knowledge and seems to be the limit and extent of the internet's knowledge. But I was wondering if they took inspiration for their name from a documentary. I think it was a Swedish documentary. Well, not a documentary, but it was an independent film that was shown at film festivals, and it was called Zombie and the Ghost Train, which was about a bass player and heavy drinker zombie trying to join a band and get his life together. So I don't know if the name came from that, but I thought it was kind of interesting to trip over that on the internet.
It is interesting.
Yeah.
It's very close, so it could be, but you'd have to find a band member and grill them about it.
Right. But the reason I specifically chose Dealing the Death Card is because I stumbled across this band in the early YouTube days and really fell in love with their style and also the sound of the music, which is, well, it's psychobilly. It's sped up rockabilly with like theremin and like weird sounds. So we're talking an upright bass and guitars and a drummer and backing vocals and sort of that like doo-wah style. And it's very much that they are definitely living on a post-Cramps legacy, and they make, well, what they call monster rock and roll.
Hence the song.
Yeah. So it's a lot of the themes that you would find in, say, like old rockabilly music, but with a sort of darker, I don't know how you would describe it, like, because it's not a cult, but with like just a darker schlocky twist.
Yeah, I mean they're definitely, they've got that old B-movie late night monster show camp with their whole aesthetic and lyrics and themes and all that, along with the high energy and sort of devil may care, go fuck yourself attitude of punk.
Yeah. Plus the tunes are catchy as hell.
They're really, really catchy. Yeah. No, I was bopping and singing along to all of them. Especially helped that both singers were well within my vocal range. So I would just be, I mean, like always, I like the bass baritone better, but I'd sing that, then also sing along with the tenor singer, and it was great. It was a perfect little car karaoke album for me.
Except on the subway.
No, I drive to work.
You're that guy on the subway.
No, I'm
remember,
very reserved on the subway.
I had this on iTunes because it's not on Spotify. I believe Glad Rags and Body Bags, their first album is on Spotify, but not their second. But
I had to find
also a great name.
Yeah, I got it on YouTube. That just one track, the full album, so I didn't have like track dividers. So that's what I listened to it from.
I think that's the link that I shared too, because it's I didn't want to share like iTunes with y'all because I had it on iTunes back in the day. And I remember listening to it one time in my car, and my cousin walks out into the driveway and is like listening to it, and it's just like, why do you listen to such weird music? And I'm like, this really isn't the weirdest thing I listen to, but okay.
Some
That's really
people only want to listen to the radio.
Radio's boring. I lived on a tiny little pen drive MP3 player and burned CDs.
Yeah.
Yeah, I admittedly do like radio, but like college radio stations, those weird ones with all the kids doing whatever random show every hour. So that was my radio for the most part after I graduated from high school, because high school it was all alternative radio in the 90s. Very pop stuff. Well, I guess the grunge rock stuff that was popular at the time.
Yeah, but psychobilly is kind of what led me into death rock, because I found death rock way too inaccessible the first time that I tried to listen to it, and I kind of had to ease in through psychobilly, which makes sense. 45 Grave is considered, the origin of horror rock, or not horror rock, horror punk, psychobilly, and death rock. I don't know why I almost forgot that last one. That's the most important one.
The entire thing you were kind of talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I'm trying to remember what got me into psychobilly. I mean, I've liked rockabilly for ages, and I was well into goth before I discovered psychobilly. So I mean, I probably discovered psychobilly maybe 15 years ago, but I'd been listening to goth for 10 years by that point, and I was familiar with, but as has been many times mentioned on this show, I'm not really a huge death rock fan, though I don't hate it. I like a lot of death rock. But yeah, psychobilly, when I found out I think I got into gothabilly first, but there's arguments about whether there's actually much difference or where you draw those lines sometimes.
The only reason that we have gothabilly is because there was a compilation album called that, and the name stuck, but really it's the same as psychobilly in my opinion.
I'm inclined to agree with you. There are some that I would say, and I would actually point out on this album, some tracks that I would argue veer towards what I would consider gothabilly, and some that veer more towards psychobilly. But it's an energy level thing for me.
Yeah. I grew up on
like more
classic blues and classic country, and I know Ryan had a point about how it has a classic country sound in the latter half of the album.
A little bit of surf, a little bit of country. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, if you want an example, I'd say something like Trouble is a little bit more gothabilly, where something like Monster Rock and Roll, or what was the other one that was really upbeat? Well, Monster Rock and Roll really comes at Dead End Crew. Yeah, Dead End Crew is probably more what I would view leaning towards psychobilly. Well, that's just sort of my arbitrary,
trying to puzzle it out kind of opinion.
That was a question that sort of came up in my head listening through this, because not necessarily about gothabilly, but you have songs like Step Into My Coffin, which could very easily be goth song lyrics.
Yes.
But the band isn't goth. And so, in the back of my head throughout the album was that sort of question of what really makes goth music, because there's all these different signifiers for what is and isn't. Because one of the other things I was thinking about was do goths not have enough fun? Because that was the, something I really got out of this album was how much fun it was. And I kind of thought about like, okay, well, who's the funny goth musician? And the first person I thought of course, was Voltaire, but also he's sort of a goth that's in a band that's not a goth band. So it's this sort of circling back on itself, trying to understand where it comes from. I know there have been a lot of like self-referential, snarky parody songs and things like that from goth bands, and I played a lot of them on the Gothquisition, but those tend to be like one-off tracks, and so it got me. I didn't spend a lot of time thinking about this, so if you guys have thoughts, please do. But I didn't think of a lot of goofy, silly goth bands.
If I had to pull out goofy, silly goth bands, the first one that comes to mind is very clearly Alien Sex Fiend.
Yeah,
absolutely no question. That is the number one that comes to mind. Specimen is quickly after that. And then 45 Grave actually comes pretty quickly after that too, but mostly because of the riboflavin song, which is very fun and campy. But yeah, definitely Alien Sex Fiend is my biggest one. I mean, Bauhaus is always often viewed as jokey, and a lot of their B-sides are pretty jokey. Like, I mean, I love their little what is it?
Fish cakes?
Yes.
Well, they're jokey, but would you describe them as fun?
Right, exactly. I mean, like Fish Cakes is fun. So that's not the title. I think that's, I don't remember that might be the song Peter Murphy, because they were all named after band members that, I think there were 4 different little short songs that the Fish Cakes one was one of them. And then they always say the Bela Lugosi's Dead is big tongue in cheek, but it is only when it's sort of a thinky tongue in cheek funny song. Listening to it, it's very moody and atmospheric.
Yeah.
Especially when you hear the re-recorded David J, the way he originally envisioned it version too. And it's uber spooky.
Yeah.
Yeah, when I want fun music, goth rock is typically not the first place I go. Usually it's death rock or punk or psychobilly.
Yeah, right. I usually go to post-punk, but I'll also, I mean, if I really want fun music, it's going to be Weird Al or They Might Be Giants. Or if I just want psychotic, it's going to be Mr. Bungle.
No Aquabats.
I love Aquabats. I do love Aquabats. That's fair. There's a
Colorado
Russian band that I quite like too, that I don't remember off the top of my head. That's similar.
Well, I also love psychobilly, but I don't really listen to it, so I really appreciated you recommending this. I also don't know really how popular the band is, but like Trey, I had not heard of this band before, although I have heard the first song a few times, I think.
Okay.
So that was interesting, but I love the horror gimmick. Again, in contrast to like Blutengel, we'll kind of get to the differences there maybe when we get to Blutengel, but yeah, I love that they cover the gamut of like monster horror and gothic horror and body horror, and then wrap that all up in this like goofy D-grade horror film package. And it was so much fun. Like, not to put too fine a point on it, but I'm used to more morose horror through goth stuff. And when I was listening to this, I was smiling and dancing and just having a really fun time. And it's so catchy. You really can dance to this. For me, there wasn't any track that I didn't really like. Although, to be fair, like I don't really listen to psychobilly, so I'm kind of coming at it fresh. Whereas I guess with anything, you can have genre fatigue, and find music to feel repetitive or derivative, but didn't really find anything too samey. I think the only issue I had wasn't with the music, but the Bats in the Belfry song was a bit misogynistic. I was going to
bring that one up too. It's not just that it's misogynistic, but it's that I have a big pet peeve around the just sort of reduction of either gender. Doesn't matter whether though it is usually men to women. When you portray an ex after a bitter breakup as insane. One, it's just reductive of people who actually have mental health issues, which is problematic in and of itself. But two, it's a way of basically dehumanizing the other so you don't have to acknowledge that you had some part to play
Yeah.
in the dissolution of this relationship.
Yes.
You're basically saying, nope, not my fault. I'm all perfect and fun and wonderful. But this other person, they're a psycho.
Mm-hmm.
And I've known so many people who talk about how, oh, they always have all these psycho exes. And I'm like, I think I've said this before, but you've had a lot of relationships that break up, and there's only one thing that's the same about all of those relationships. Has nothing to do with the psychotic.
Oh no, it's just the kind of I'm attracted to psychos. That's what the problem is. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, right. That's what they say. I'm attracted to psycho women. I was like, no, you're not.
Yeah.
You just like to call them all psycho because that makes you feel better when it ends.
Yeah.
You don't have to have any blame. So yeah,
No self-reflection. Yeah.
That is my only issue with this whole album. Is I loved that song. It was catchy. It was fun, but thematically, that is a pet peeve of mine.
Yeah, that does pop up actually a lot in all of the like rockabilly and related genres. Is a lot of this 1950s sort of mindset ported forward.
Yeah.
Actually, there was a whole Daria episode about that, if I remember correctly.
I don't remember that, but I'm sure I've seen it because I've seen most, if not all, of Daria, I think.
It's the one where Jane had a boyfriend who'd wear a zoot suit and got criticized for mixing decades and had to be like the perfect femme.
Huh. Yeah, I'll have to see if I can find that because I mean it's been a long time since I mean I don't think I've really watched Daria much since it originally came out, but I did really like Daria.
Well, what I really liked about this album was the bass, because I'm a big bass guitar fan, and I know the genre uses like, what is it, upright bass, slap bass, whatever you call it.
It's an upright bass, but the style of it's a percussive style, so similar to slap, but the bass itself is upright.
Okay.
But you get that big resounding, like reverberating bass tone. Oh, and it's just so
right up
tasty.
through my butthole. The
reverberating bass tone and just the huge slap of those heavy strings against the wood as they hit it.
Mm-hmm.
I love slapping strings against my wood.
You do, I know.
But yeah,
I was just gonna say I saw Coffin Cats, or another like band in this sort of genre space, and
it's spelled with a K,
I saw
right?
them. Yeah. I saw them live at a punk bar that had a really shitty sound system, and the only way I could tell the songs is because the upright bass, you could hear it from the back of the room.
Yeah, they don't really need that much amplification.
No.
When you got a giant fuck off piece of wood resonating everything that comes at it, it cuts through things pretty well. Yeah. I'm kind of curious if everyone has a favorite track or a highlight.
What's yours, Azzy?
Teddy Boy Boogie.
That's what I was going to bring up. Why is that your favorite track?
Because it's just such a boogie. Plus, I like the just evocative lyrics of just gang violence, anti-cop violence in the streets.
Yeah, I think this is going to be pretty boring because that's it's also my highlight. One thing I really loved about that is it really highlighted the idea that I'd read about but not really thought about very much. But the Droogs from Clockwork Orange were inspired by the Teddy Boy subculture, and that track just totally lays that right out. It's like, oh yeah, of course.
Yeah, like razor blades and the lapels and
and just hair triggers and immediately going to deadly violence. Yeah.
Yep.
A little bit of the ultra violence.
I love the chorus made me smile every time I heard it. It's just so fun and silly.
Yeah, that was like this will get me on the dance floor anytime it comes on. If it gets played at a club, it's like I will dance to that song. It's just you can't not.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of irreverence, and throwing like levity in there with it is just a really good combination, especially when everything sucks right now.
Yeah.
Along came a copper and he took my name. He put his dirty molars on my long gray coat, so I ripped out my razor and I slit his throat. a teddy boy boogie, a boogity boogity boo. Ooh, 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 a teddy boy boogie, boogie, boogity boogity boo. Well, I'm a teddy boy 'cause that's the life I choose. I wear a draped jacket and a blue suede shoes. I smoke a big cigar and dig the local hop. Saturday night to see my baby dancing to the bop. Ooh, teddy boy boogie, a boogity boogity boo. A teddy boy boogie, a boogity boogity boo. Ooh, 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 a teddy boy boogie, boogie, boogity boogity boo. I was out on a chicken run, getting my kicks and having some fun. A cop car came up from behind, so I whipped out my razor and I changed his mind. Teddy boy boogie, a boogity boogity boo. A teddy boy boogie, a boogity boogity boo. Ooh, 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 a teddy boy boogie, boogie, boogity boogity boo.
I think I gave everyone's thing at least 3 or 4 listens, but I've been busy all
Yeah.
month, so I didn't get to take notes. I liked about halfway through the album when the rockabilly stuff kind of petered out and it gave way to like surf and country feel.
Mhm.
Okay. Yeah, that
I've
was
seen-
that was actually
I've
towards
s-
the very last third. Like To the River, the Undead Sea was their definite surf track.
Yeah.
Long Dark
I
Night was country.
I think I've just like seen too much rockabilly and psychobilly.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Like I've seen Reverend Horton Heat and Coffin Cats, and I play with these dudes the Dead End all the time, and I'm
Mhm.
just like, enough with the ticka 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 every song. But I liked the kind of old school country feel, and surf guitar is what made me pick up guitar. So
Okay.
Mm.
Yeah, I love
anytime
surf
it
guitar.
went
Yeah.
away from the hillbilly rock, I was more into it. And I think when we come back around to my album, can talk a little bit more, but I've always been more into blues than country. So I've
Mhm.
never been able to stand Elvis. I've always been a Beatles,
And I don't like
I
either
like
of them.
them. I actually like both. So yeah,
How dare you? Pick a
I'm
side.
with Danny. I don't like either of them.
I'm a bigger Beatles fan, to be fair, and I'm definitely Beatles over Stones. But I like Elvis a lot too. But it really depends on the song.
Well, I did end up listening to a bunch of the Ventures after the Undead Sea, the track The Undead Sea, because
Yep.
it reminded me of like a late night horror TV show version of the Ventures, who are fantastic. Like I forgot how good the Ventures are, so I listened to a bunch of that.
Them and their like
Um,
50 albums of covers.
Yeah, yeah.
Just gotta put
Uh,
Surf and Bird on repeat.
Mhm.
Oh, there is a really good No Dogs in Space podcast episode
Just started
about the
listening to
history of
that.
that song.
I just started listening to that podcast. I started
There's
with their,
one
Really,
just
Trey?
on that
Oh my gosh,
song,
you've been
it's nuts.
sleeping.
I have been sleeping. I have been sleeping. No, I started with their krautrock series because I'm a huge krautrock fan, and I was looking for krautrock stuff, but now I'm starting on their punk stuff.
Oh, I started them because I was just like, I need to hear what they have to say about Iggy Pop.
Mm.
Yep. I'm in the middle of that right now because that's the first of their punk album. But yeah, that's a great podcast for those who want to listen to other music podcasts to supplement this delightful thing.
Before I tune out with my thoughts on the album, though, if you guys want a little something different in the psychobilly genre, I have buddies in Denver called America's Most Haunted.
Mhm.
We labeled them Cemetery Oi. They're
Nice.
but so it's like an Oi based punk psychobilly type band. It almost sounds a little Motorheady at times, but their singer Andy also has a country-ish project called Jukebox Hard Knocks, where he does like half of the songs from America's Most Haunted as like country ballads with his little
Oh.
hollow body Gretsch. So
Fun.
worth checking
Did you
out.
call them like Samoy
I might have. You could.
Also very good.
Samoy Terry Confessions.
Yeah.
Uh,
Oi,
Don't
oi,
you
oi.
know?
Anyway,
Well,
oi,
another-
don't you know?
You betcha.
oh God.
am I the only non-Midwesterner on this podcast right now?
Yeah.
Pretty
I think
much.
so,
Yeah.
Oh,
Why do you think I
geez.
can talk so fast?
I mean, Dusty made a whole career off of the backs of Midwestern accents. So
He's from Athens, Georgia.
another track I really liked was "Down to the River." That was probably my second favorite.
Yeah. That
like you
one
said-
gave me Where the Wild Roses Grow by Nick Cave. But mostly just
Oh,
thematically.
sure, yeah.
But exact same theme. But actually, I like To the River probably a little bit better, but they're very different.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's you get this sort of like creeping strumming that sounds like you're walking
Mhm.
through the woods, and there's that country western twang that sort of comes in that you guys were talking about to give that like old west feeling. It actually reminded me of the the movie Blood Rain 2, which was a cheesy vampire movie set in a country western town, which is like thematically appropriate. It feels like Tombstone, Arizona, or something like that. So
Is
go
that
ahead.
a sequel to the video game movie Blood Rain?
Yeah,
Or is
I
that
don't know if Blood.
with
I
a
think the
Y?
movie came before the video game.
Okay.
I
Not
think.
related.
How many Blood Rain movies were there? Like 3? Anyway,
I don't even know.
yeah, and it also reminded me, especially when we start getting into the country western stuff, it gave the vibe of those kind of weird mashups that you'd get in like the show Penny Dreadful, to use another monster analog. Azzy, I'm interested. I do want to hear if you thought this album held up to your memory of it. But I think
yeah.
for me, I've always loved cheesy horror horror films, or monster films. Like I grew up in high school with a friend who was a movie critic, and we'd always have movie nights where we'd watch like Night of the Lepus or Troll 2 or Kingdom of Spiders or that kind of thing. And it was fun to have something about monsters that is also atmospheric and in some ways explores like dark philosophical themes lightly, without being so morose and melancholy. And it was nice to listen to something uplifting and silly. And I think I came away from it again thinking like that's definitely an underserved market for goth music, despite how goofy I think goths can be. And that just made me sort of think around this concept of why do we like goth adjacent music so much, and what are the elements we can get in those bands that we don't get in goth music proper. And for me, this was just like, it's just fun. It's silly, it's goofy.
Yeah.
My son's knocking on my door. Go ahead, discuss.
Yeah, re-listening to it definitely made me bop as much as the first day I listened to the album. So I feel like it really held up for me over the intervening. I don't want to I don't want to name the years. It makes me feel old, but yeah, no, still just as much fun, still just as silly. I still remembered all the words.
Yeah. So frankly, it's really easy to pick them up. So yeah,
Yep.
I knew the words after only a couple of listens. So
Hmm.
like I said, I was belting them out for the most part anytime that album came up on the playlist.
I do envy the ability to make half your lyrics the title of the song.
Well, it's because you write essays, not songs.
I know. Yeah, I have too much to say. I wish I were shallow.
No, you wish you were concise.
He writes sins, not tragedies, for anyone who gets that reference.
Nope.
Everyone's frantically Googling. So, any other thoughts about this album, or we can move on?
I think we can move on.
Yeah.
All right.
Agreed.
Schmerzen sind noch spürbar, wenn die Lust bereits vergangen und vergessen ist.
Sagt, was ihr verlangt.
I want you for my pleasure. I need you to satisfy my lust. I want you to be my companion. I want you to fly with me through the night. We play this perverted game. We are hunting in the night. We kill for satisfaction, and we need the blood. You have to serve me every night. You will never be my slave. I want to serve you every night. You will never be my
I have a lot to say about Blutengel, and so I'm just going to talk, and feel free to interrupt me.
Regale us.
To start introducing my history with the band and why I picked this album. So everybody knows about Blutengel, obviously, everyone in the scene at least. And they tend to be a divisive band. I think, they've been around for a long time. They formed in 98. They put out a lot of music, a lot of albums, singles, EPs, remixes, albums with double albums, that kind of thing. And Chris has multiple industrial side projects as well. So he's basically, it feels like at least he's constantly churning out music. And then obviously, because there's such a propinquity, which is a word I learned from Trey many years ago, thank you, Trey, between goths and vampires, that everyone's going to kind of have an opinion on the band, I think. Either you sort of roll your eyes and laugh at how cheesy and juvenile it is, or I guess you can be indifferent, but I think it's either you're a fan or not. My last album of Blutengel's that I listened to was Monument in 2015, which I have the collector's edition of. That's about where I fell off keeping up with them. So I'm not really familiar with any of the new music they've put out, other than a couple remixes here and there.
Yeah, your album pick was the last Blutengel album that I really picked up. So anything after, I'm not familiar with.
Well, that's interesting. Their sound does change pretty dramatically over albums, and I don't think they're really sound the same at all. I'll maybe get into that a little bit in a second. But
did Chris pull to She Hates Emotions?
Oh, I actually don't know that one.
I'm gonna Google it.
Furious Googling.
There's like 3 of them I know. The only one that's popping in my head right now is Terminal Choice. Oh, Misconstruction. I think he was part of that fucking nightmare. Something else. Anyway, so I got into Blutengel in high school, which was right after I'd watched movies like Interview with the Vampire and Queen of the Damned, and I was exploring the world of darkness, and I was full of imagination and hormones. So this sort of like lust and longing strewn fantasy world was pretty enticing. The awkwardness, the repetition, the inconsistent narratives didn't really hit me because I was I'm a sexy undead bloodsucker. That's the important part. I was a little worried about listening to this album again because I did not think it was going to hold up. I also had a hard time choosing which album because even back then I didn't really listen through an album of theirs. I would kind of pick the best songs and make a better album. And also
I can relate.
Yeah. And like I said, their new stuff is completely different. Like the older stuff is much less produced. It has this sort of edge to it. It's not as polished, I guess, and it's more intimately romantic, whereas I think a lot of the later music is going for more of a grand, dramatic feeling. I kind of thought of bands like Wumpscut and Synthron, the differences between their early stuff and their later stuff.
For reference, what year was this album?
This one
2004.
was... Yep.
20 years.
Yeah. So the thing with Blutengel, why I thought this was such a good contrast, is because I feel like they take themselves very seriously, whereas the previous album does not take itself seriously. But yeah, Blutengel feels like one of those bands that doesn't know how silly they are. And I don't know if that's actually true, but that's my perception of how Chris takes himself overly seriously. And I think a lot of fans take him too seriously. Go ahead.
Oh, I think I posted when I first listened to it. I would invite everyone to look at their Spotify bio and get a tone for how they think of themselves.
Role model, I think, was the third descriptor.
There was genius in there somewhere, and yeah.
They're a genius when they call themselves a genius.
Let me just pull it up.
It's
It-
you know
We only need one paragraph, you know? Let's see. Author, actor, role model. But first and foremost, Chris Pohl is a grade A musician. With his band Blutengel, the Berlin-based icon of dark music can now look back on a successful career. Blah, blah, blah. You get it.
Yeah. And I think there are fans like that as well that kind of remind me of like Disney parents or Twilight moms or whatever that take, it's finding joy in something is fine. I just think regardless of how cringe it might be. But I do think it becomes an issue when it is an escape to the point that you're ignoring everything else in your life and any sort of critical lens and like the people who walk around looking at the world through the lens of Taylor Swift's politics or something. That's the sort of thing that it makes me think of. And it's funny too because the lyrics sound like something I wrote when I was 16, and I wrote a lot of bad goth poetry. And so it's the band I think is going to rebuff people of a certain level of emotional maturity.
Yeah, when I was listening to this, this was an album that was on the background. Did we say the album name? Demon Kiss? I don't remember, doesn't matter.
Demon Kiss.
But this album was on in the background for a lot of my hanging out in a high school friend's basement playing World of Darkness. Because my friend's boyfriend really loved Blutengel, and we had this album on repeat constantly. So that transported me.
Oh, good. I'm glad I could put you in a time machine.
Yeah.
Hopefully
It was
still
an interesting
relatively
sensation.
good memories. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cheeto dust, Mountain Dew, dank basement,
Fake
pretending to be
fangs.
vampires.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Character sheets, dice.
Yep.
So thinking about the music, what I think of when I think of Blutengel, I think you'll get generally a play between male and female vocals. I think in general, for me, they have a usually well-crafted, catchy kind of synth pop chorus that is the highlight of the song usually. And the first part of the song is more of a build-up to the chorus, which I think is usually the weakest part of the track. I think they can kind of feel more strained. I think on this album, Solitary Angel is a good example of that. And then of course you get the world building of the dark, sexy, hunger-driven violence and undead vampires. And I think they try to make the music feel anthemic in a way. They're trying to get you to, like, I guess listening to it while playing World of Darkness is a great example of that. I feel like they're trying to make something that can be a soundtrack to your life in a way that transforms it into something more fantastical than your everyday life. That's, I think, the goal of what they're trying to do.
In that respect, they reminded me a lot of Cruise Shadows. Even the taking themselves seriously.
Yeah. That's a good.
Cruise
Yeah.
Shadows has their own
Quite a lot,
cosmology,
yes.
as they describe it.
Yeah. That's a great comparison, actually. I'm not going to go off on Crux Shadows again, although it has been a while. But I'll leave that alone. My favorite songs from the band tend to be the ones that really lean into romanticism and are usually not the dance-heavy electronic tracks. So a few that I pulled off the top of my head were Black Roses, not from this album, Black Roses, Black Wedding, Die With You. On this album, it would be the track Silent Tears. I like a lot of their piano versions of their songs when they, I don't know which ones, but some of their albums that you buy the physical copy of have a bonus disc that comes with called Dark and Pure, which is so bad. I know, it's so bad. But they basically take songs and then do piano and vocal versions of them. And that's usually my favorite, the sort of haunting romantic type of song.
This one had Stay.
That's right. Yeah, I was going to bring that up because there was just that cover by who was it? The Scooby Doo band. What the fuck is Ghost? Yes, thank you. Which was really good. I don't know. Did you guys like the cover on this?
I do like this cover.
It was a fine cover. I think Chris ruins it, but until he starts singing, it's a great. I'm not gonna say it's a great cover, but it's a very solid, straight cover of the song. There's not a lot of interpretation to it, but it's solid.
Yeah, I mean, you do get a little bit of more, what are they, like bombast, just because they fit it into their music style. And it's like, oh, hey, I know exactly what song this is. It doesn't reinvent it, but I think it could be played alongside the original.
Yeah, no, like I said, I think it's a solid cover, but nothing revelatory for me.
Well, to throw out, I did make a list. I'll throw out a couple other songs that I do like of theirs in that vein. Because the first album I heard was Seelenschmerz. And so tracks off there like Dying Alone or Die With You and Children of the Night, I really enjoyed. And then the third album, Angel Dust, had songs on there like Black Wedding, I Will Follow, and Angel of the Night, not to be confused with Angels of the Dark on this album. A lot of their songs have the same fucking name, basically. But I picked Demon Kiss because it's, I think, where the band started to get popular and was kind of a pivotal time in their career where you started to hear more of the seeds of what they would become known for later on. But you still had that very raw feeling that you got from the first few albums.
I think this was also the last album that Ava was on.
Oh, that's what I was wondering. I didn't remember if it was Ulrich. Yeah, I couldn't remember if it was her or somebody else.
I don't remember her last name, but yeah, this was the last album that she had been on. She was on the first.
She's great.
Also confirmed, Chris Polish, She Hates Emotion, which terrible band name.
But what if she wanted revenge?
Yeah.
Yeah. And who saw her die? Like, we need to stop having like all male bands that just decide to put she and her and whatever in the name, but it's fine. Whatever. But She Hates Emotion is more of like a minimal dark wave project.
What, you don't like men voicing women for some reason?
Oh, no, it's
know them
super
so
great.
well, though.
I totally love when a woman gets put up on a pedestal and completely venerated and has no other defining features other than I have chosen you worthy to put on this pedestal. No, I think it's fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, I will say that the track Frozen...
No mercy, sister.
The track Frozen Heart, which was the one where she was the main singer, is my favorite song on the album. Because it has a really good melody. It's dancey. You get that melancholic mood with dancey electronics. And then I think she has almost like an Enya kind of vibe from her voice that I like. Yeah, it's melodic, romantic. It's kind of stripped down at the beginning, and then it drops you right into the bass line, which is like a perfect bass line for a dance club. And you get this sort of soaring synth pop melody throughout, which is that's usually my favorite part of a Blutengel song, is the melody.
Stand alone in the wind, spread her arms against the night, lose her faith in her heart and in her mind, cried out loud against a storm, her eyes looked like she was stillborn, flesh divide the heaven like her frozen heart.
My favorite track, I think, would have been Ice Angel, and that's simply because it has a good floaty vibe.
Track 2, I pulled out because I think it's a good song. I still like that song, but it has the highs and lows of Chris's lyrical acumen. With one of the lines is, I want to suck you every night. You'll forever be my slave. You want to suck me every night. You'll forever be my mistress, which is so bad. But then there's like the line, in the coldness of your grave, I hold you in my arms forever, which I like. I think that's cute. But it really is that sort of dramatic high school goth poetry.
That's probably why I prefer their German lyrics, actually. Just their German language songs, I think, are the ones that I'm more consistently like, yeah, all right.
That's what I, Trey and I have talked about this before.
Or a favorite track on this album was the last track, at least on the version I got, which was Verzweiflung, which was all in German. So that one had no lyrical things, but it also was probably the most interesting musically because it threw a lot of really sort of interesting sound collage experimental things in there. It wasn't quite as straightforward. Definitely not a dancey track. But I really did like that track. That was probably the highlight for me on the album.
And the German lyric thing was interesting that you brought up, Azzy, too, because I remember years and years and years ago, we had somebody from Austria, and I asked her this question because I think it was the first German-speaking person I had on the show. And she said that their lyrics in German are just as bad as the English ones. So I mean, I don't know. I don't speak German, so I had to take her word for it.
Yeah, so it's not an ESL situation. It's just bad lyrics.
What else? There's the track Love Killer, I thought sounded more like a Terminal Choice song, which is where Chris does the sort of pointed, monotone growl kind of vocals with the more harsher sounding distortion and stuff. And I never really liked those Blutengel songs. I don't think it works as well because it tries to do this weird, it's not electro, it's not harsh EBM, it's not dark electro, but it has some of that in there, but it's still trying to be a Blutengel song. And it just never quite sounds right to me. They do, to be fair, so one of the big criticisms of Blutengel is, which my wife has had over the years, is their music starts to sound all the same. And there's not a lot of exploration of different music themes or even lyrical themes. And you'd think, having been around for so long, they would stop writing the same song over and over.
Stop singing about that angels that are definitely, and we make a very specific point of this, these angels are not from heaven sent.
No.
That's a very important distinction that is made at least 2 or 3 times in this album alone.
If I wasn't fascinated by the nostalgia, I think I would have been horrifically bored by this album.
Well, that's the problem I have, is when they try to do something different, it usually doesn't work for me because, so like, for example, he's done dubstep stuff, auto-tune stuff.
I don't even want to even think of what their dubstep stuff sounds like.
Break beats, that kind of thing. Like the song, what was the song on this? Resurrection or something that sounded kind of like a Renaissance fair sort of song. I think whenever he does try something outside of their wheelhouse, it ends up sounding just like a shitty version of that genre. I don't think it's ever really incorporated well, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Well, you're not an icon of dark music with over 25 years of hits.
You're right. I don't know what I'm talking about.
Right. So I guess the interesting thing from my perspective on this album is, I know you introduced this as it being a band that everybody knows and has an opinion. I clearly know it because I have a lot of their albums in my collection. I clearly downloaded their discography at some point, but I couldn't have named a single track when I started listening to it. I didn't really recognize the songs. So I'm not that familiar with the band, even though I've clearly heard of them and clearly downloaded some of their music.
Interesting.
But so this was kind of an almost introduction for me to the band. When you first said who it was, I I can't think of the band, but there's another band that you're a huge fan of, and I thought that's what you were talking
Dynalakayan?
about. That's the one. Yeah,
Nah.
I thought you were talking about Dynalakayan.
No, that's actually a good band.
I agree. That's why I was like I don't mind this. I like Dynalakayan. So I was expecting like the sort of operatic
Oh,
male
I'm sorry.
vocals and that, not really expecting it, but that's what I was sort of thinking of. That I mean the name rung a bell, but I couldn't really place any specific songs. I'm like, oh, I know a band that Danny really likes, so maybe he's talking that one. But
Are
then
you familiar with the band Inomine?
yes,
See
is
that
that
those
also
those
Chris?
bands feel like it's what Chris wants Blutengel to be.
Ah, okay.
Uh, but it's not. That's what, like, he did the Dark Meets Classic thing. Remember that, where they had the industrial bands convert their songs into orchestral pieces, and they had an
Mhm.
orchestra play them. That's like he was probably coming in his pants the whole time. Like, that's what he's trying to make, something like that. But
Yeah.
it's the level of art he's going for is not where the music is at, and I think that
Mhm.
dissonance is discombobulating.
Yeah. The other funny thing is just, when I first put it on, um, the very first album, I'm like, is this a Wumpscut track?
Yeah.
Because the first two or three tracks are, at least their intros are 100% Wumpscut intros. They've got the weird German sound clips from
Mhm.
like German shows or radio or something. The sort of interesting sound design stuff that Rudy's, I think, pretty good at. Um, but then of course Chris starts
I
singing
really
like,
like
nope,
Wumpscut.
I
Yeah.
do too. I'm a big Wumpscut fan. Um, but then yeah, when Chris's singing comes in, like, nope, not Wumpscut. Um, I well, one, I don't like Chris's singing. Not because of the lyrics. I think the lyrics are really bad too, but he's I think this is similar to what Azzy's complained about too, but he definitely has that sort of one note, no passion kind of, at least
Yeah.
to me, the sort of
The
one note
disaffected,
disaffected.
dispassionate
Yep, the disaffected
vampire trope.
baritone vampire trope. Deep voice
Yeah.
vampire with no emotion, no passion. Even though they may be singing about passion, but they're not expressing any of that in their voice. And that's never anything I've liked.
Which is
But
also a good vampire trope. You've lived so long, you just don't feel anymore and you're just faking the emotions.
it is, the funny thing though is all of these songs and the lyrics, when I'm putting myself in the shoes of like a vampire as it's portrayed in movies and books and stuff. This feels like the lyrics written by someone who's been a vampire for about a year, maybe two, are still really hyped up on this power trip, this power
Mhm.
fantasy,
There was a lot of
and,
that. Yeah.
and don't understand the downside, because frankly, almost all vampire literature and vampire cinema that I've watched really hits on this thing that, living forever really, really sucks.
Yeah.
It's not a good
Well,
time.
Is there a pun intended in there?
Yeah, no, but it's, you could take it as you will.
I mean,
But
you're right. Sorry, go ahead.
I was thinking that this feels like a very young vampire, still very into their little power trip fantasy and really leaning into their sort of savior complex, trying
Yeah.
to attract vulnerable women. And the
Yeah.
whole album was kind of to me, sort of a love letter to codependent relationships. The thing that I did like about it is that at least Chris puts himself on both sides of the codependency. So sometimes he's the enabler savior complex one who wants the person that desperately needs him, and he's going to save them and rescue them and take them away from their horrible life to give them this wonderful fantasy. But on other songs, he can't live without this person that is going to rescue him and save him from his terrible banal existence, and they're this ideal wonderful person. So at least he doesn't simply live in the male power fantasy, but it is mostly the male power fantasy.
Yeah.
But he
I
had
mean,
a couple of vulnerable moments.
it's a lot of it's a lot of sort of like oh, you're a special snowflake that's worthy of escaping into a better world kind of thing, if I'm being generous. And I think
Yes.
two of the things that you said that bother me are one, the theming, there's a lot of potential for existential content, because we're talking about fear of death and aging and feeling like there's forces beyond your control that are influencing the direction of your life, and what immense relief there is in being conscripted into this secret world where you have some control. But it's not, it's really one note. And then for the power dynamic thing, again, I'm not familiar with anything past like 2014, 2015, but a lot of the music videos visually displayed that as well, where it's like Chris sitting on a throne with hot vampire women half dressed all over the place kind of thing, which also, when that's all you do, just feels kind of icky to me.
Yeah. It's
Speaking
funny you
of
mentioned
icky,
this. Go ahead.
There's the moaning like interlude on one of the tracks. Oh, I
forgot
that.
about that. Oh man, what a trope of industrial from a certain time period.
Yeah.
Yeah, the only band, I keep forgetting which track it is, but Wumpscut is the only band that I actually enjoyed when they did the sort of porn samples, because Rudy actually made it into a beat rather than it just being sort of a moaning. It was it was actually pretty an interesting.
Somebody
groove
auto-tune that
kind
and
of
I'll throw it on the episode.
That I actually really enjoyed. But yeah, to mention, you mentioned the sort of special snowflake trope. I actually named the first song the "Not Like Other Girls" track.
Yeah. Okay.
That's totally what it was. Is that you're this special. You don't belong in this world. You belong in my world. You're not like other girls.
Speaking of the porn thing, I'm pretty sure it was Caustic. I went to see them play in, okay, let me think. I want to say it was like maybe 2010-ish. And they had a projector behind them of, it was just like a hyper fast cut video that was like an hour long or however long their set was. And there was stuff in there like clips from horror movies and TV shows and stuff, but there were a ton of just hardcore porn, like fisting and like weird fetish stuff. It's like, what a time to be alive in the industrial scene.
This is a complete tangential story, but I went to a fetish night that was supposed to be a goth night. I think it was in 2015, and I walk in and there are screens all around the venue because it's by day a strip club of hardcore clown porn.
Nice.
And just being assaulted with that in a place you don't expect, like, I don't know, say a show, it's very unsettling.
Yeah. Yeah, and it was pretty extreme porn too, which was, like I did not expect that to be happening.
Yeah, I'm used to at least a couple of the clubs I've been to have, it's not usually, I've never been to any that have extreme porn, but usually some relatively like B grade, like Skinamax kind of stuff on a loop on the TV.
Rosebuds and pissing and stuff like that.
That's a choice.
Wow.
This album did make me want to go listen to Lacrimosa though.
Oh yeah.
That's good.
So I went and I listened to Lacrimosa. I think when I was like 19, I took a road trip down to North Carolina and I only brought one CD because I left my CD binder in the house and it was a Lacrimosa album. So that was my accompaniment on a straight through trip from Wisconsin to North Carolina.
Wow.
I liked being transported back to an era.
Yeah.
And this did it so fucking hard.
Yeah, back when I had joy and hope in my heart.
That romantic fragility.
Yeah.
Is that your side project, Azzy?
Okay, you need to be more specific because I just said a lot of words.
Romantic fragility totally sounds like a solo project.
I mean, I have crushed that so long ago. I
definitely see that. Yeah,
I didn't build a wall around it. It is now a little, glass ballerina shattered to dust.
Yeah, see, there's your first song lyrics right there.
You got a few days before this episode goes up. I would get it out there.
Yeah.
Or somebody else does.
All Goth considered really segment right at the end. And we'll get Trey's moaning sample in there.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll do a feature.
Experimental, yeah. I'm sure, yes.
Can I be there when we track that, please? Please.
It's already tracked. You just got to
You're
go
right,
back
yeah.
in the edit.
Yeah. All right. Well, what other
This is
thoughts
why
on
you need a producer.
Are you volunteering?
Are you paying?
No. I pay in giggles. How's that?
It doesn't pay bills. I'm gonna die of exposure by being paid in it.
All right, fair enough. I have no concluding thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, other than, this was the sort of first deep dive I went into this, even though I have apparently heard it before. I am in the not a fan camp.
Mhm.
I tried to get into it, and I also, like I expressed, I think once when I got together with you and we were talking with Michelle, I tried looking at other albums, looking at greatest hits compilations, looking at other things to try to find some tracks I like. And there were some that were passable, but nothing that really grabbed me. It doesn't help that it's mostly future pop, which isn't one of my favorite incarnations of industrial music.
Yeah.
I feel that future pop is,
Which I love, so that makes sense.
That's fair. I mean, I like the old school sort of harsh, noisy, antisocial industrial type stuff. I felt EBM started to file a lot of the sharp edges that I liked off of industrial, and future pop just got rid of all the rest.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I wanted to go back to my Throbbing Gristle and Einstürzende Neubauten and things like that. And when you get into the dancier stuff, I want to go no further really than the sort of electro-industrial of your Skinny Puppies.
Right. Sure. Yeah.
So yeah, it gets rid of a lot of the stuff I love about industrial music, which is just the sort of weird, this is not really musical, but it's fascinating how it's being put together, all this weird sound collage and sound design stuff. I just want to be surprised and confused by musical chaos. And when they decide to make it all dance floor friendly, it just lost a lot of the interest for me.
Yeah.
That's why I like Ogre, speaking of Skinny Puppy.
Who does the best Madonna cover ever?
I'd agree with that.
I can't say I like his Borderline cover, but I'm morbidly fascinated by his cover of Borderline.
No, they do interesting things with their sound. See, this is the problem. You get the four of us together, and Trey and I are just going to be like, we like weird shit. And Ryan is like, I like power chords, and Danny's like, wee.
I've been sitting here this whole time like, don't have anything nice to say. Not gonna say anything.
You took that lesson from your mom.
Yeah, look at you being all polite, and here I thought you were like an irreverential.
I prefer to think of it as professionalism.
Well, you're on the wrong podcast.
I mean,
I've met some of these folks,
Oh yeah,
fair. I say Ryan castigated the band far well enough by simply reading the Spotify biography.
Yeah.
I will say this about Chris Pohl. I like She Hates Emotion, which truncates to she.
That's right. Oh, yeah.
That's fun. That's very fun.
Didn't pick that up.
And then you put her on a pedestal.
It's a recursive acronym.
It just has really catchy melodies. I'm a sucker for a catchy melody.
That's fair. I mean, he has some catchy melodies and things. It's never on his voice. His voice is no catchy melody in this album. Some of the women get some decent melodies. And yeah, I agree with Danny. Some of the synth melodies can be kind of fun and catchy.
I never really thought about his voice that much because I think I'm usually singing the lyrics. Yeah. I mean, it is really, I guess you're right. It's kind of bland, which is I sing over it. So I don't really think about, I don't know. I feel like I've said way more negative about Blutengel than I intended to, or at least balanced out to how much I like the band. Cause I do still like the band. I mean, obviously, like I said, when I was younger, it was kind of the soundtrack to a lot of emotional moments and fantasy worlds and things. And obviously I've watched a lot and read a lot more media since then. And so this doesn't have nearly the impact it did when I first heard it. I wouldn't say that it's a bad album. I actually did come away thinking that I enjoyed this album with the caveat of needing to accept it for what it is. And once you sort of let go of a critical lens, or once I let go of a more critical lens, and came at it for more of like a guilty pleasure direction, I did enjoy it more. But I think I'd be lying if I didn't say that I was still disappointed, because I was really hoping it would hold up, or that I would feel something. I don't know that something inside me that's been dead for the last 5 years would awaken. But I don't know. I didn't do a 180 and come away thinking like, oh yeah, this is actually a shit band. I still did enjoy listening to them. I still do like them. There are a lot of songs that I really enjoy. I don't think any of them are on this album necessarily that are in like my top, 10 or whatever.
Mm-hmm. I'm glad we all suffered.
Yeah. I mean, I even on my old DJ podcast, I had a whole episode that was just Blutengel, like all my favorite songs put into a thematic storytelling format that I then sprinkled with vampire movie and TV show quotes. So I put a lot of love into that.
Nice.
I mean, it didn't hit me the way like the previous albums we listened to did on the previous like Facing Nostalgia ones. So yeah, take it or leave it.
That was another place that it transported me to, is back in like a lot of the old DJ mixes that you would throw together, because my now husband and I would wait for those to come out religiously.
Oh
wow.
And
Stop
we would listen to them. Hey, I've told you, like
I know.
Pre-downloaded a ton of them. Like onto an MP3 player as
You're
my
an actual DJ
when I
though,
lived in
Azzy.
Japan. Well, I am now. I wasn't then.
You were the inspiration, Danny.
No. I'm just
to be a DJ? No. To do shit for the scene? Yes. And I will tell you that every single goddamn time it comes up.
I do remember, just to completely deflect your compliment because I can't emotionally deal with it. I remember a show I DJ'd once where I played the first song I played was Spiders by Ashbury Heights.
System of a Down.
Ashbury Heights. That was the first song I played, and there weren't that many people there because I was playing between bands, but there were some goths up at the front, and one of the guys up there turned around, looked at me, and laughed, and then sat down. And that felt good, but yeah.
So one other thing I listened to in regards to this, I also did listen to we have a commentary.
Oh yeah, their
they
debate.
did many years ago, their debate on it, which I thought was really interesting. So I did listen to the album a few times and started to form my opinion before listening to that. And I don't fully agree with the reasons Bruce was anti, but I do fall in his camp for the most part.
I do think they would have a different discussion now, because I did actually go and re-listen to that as well.
Mm-hmm.
I do think they would have some different opinions now, but that was a very fun episode. If great supplementary if anyone is interested in two mega nerds debating whether Blutengel is a shitty band or not. That's a very fun episode.
Yeah, it was.
Die.
All right, well, Ryan, regale us with tales of Black Sabbath, please.
Well, let's see. That album came out in 1970.
1971 in the U.S.
Indeed. So it's the same year the Beatles broke up and kind of in the middle of the Doors' career. That gives you some idea of boomer rock.
Yeah.
Right around Dark Side of the Moon, climbing the charts. Also, Sugar Sugar by the Archies was a huge
Very
hit.
good.
Honey, honey. Yeah. No one's ever going to do a better version
You
than
are my
Wilson
candy
Pickett, by the way.
girl.
Oh,
But I can do
that's
a quick
gonna be stuck in my
rundown.
head all night. Thanks for that one, guys.
Dude, listen to the Wilson Pickett one. It's
Okay, yeah, I'm
fucking
gonna pull
amazing.
it up in a tab.
Anyway, I can give you the quick, often told rundown of Tony Iommi, because I think that band is basically the guitarist, whether or not he intended that. Because he wanted to do some solo stuff after the singers had changed a few times, and the record company was like, no one cares who you are. So he didn't get to.
Yeah, though it is all about the riffage on Black Sabbath.
Yeah.
Ozzy's great,
And
but the riffs are epic.
he writes the basis of all the songs, all the riffs. So he's son of Italian immigrants in post-war England, and he was a up-and-coming professional guitarist. Literal, like 2 days from retirement, last day, kind of cliche. He fucking hit the button on the metal press, severed a couple of his fretting fingers at the tips. And back then, it was hard to even find left-handed guitars. He thought his life was over. His boss brought him some Django Reinhardt records, and that is a French Romani jazz guitarist who had two fingers because he had burned half his body in a campfire.
Oh, wow. I like Django Reinhardt. Django Reinhardt's pretty cool.
Yeah. Django Reinhardt does a lot of fast runs and trills on his guitar with his two mutilated fingers, and you definitely hear that in Black Sabbath. But Tony Iommi does use all of his fingers because he makes his own fingertips for the last 50 plus years out of an old leather jacket and melted plastic.
Yeah, I was
That's
reading
nuts.
that he made his first fingertips out of a melted down soap bottle.
That's so punk rock.
Yeah,
I love that.
He and he's been using the same jacket for decades. There's very little of it left, but because that has the right suede feel for the leather.
Cool. One thing that I think is really cool about the way that he had to adapt, though, is he plays with a looser string style and
I was just
does
about to
chord
say
progressions.
he.
Sorry, I got excited.
Back then, they also didn't really have any other gauges of strings. They had flat wound, really hard, heavy strings. So he had to go out and find banjo strings at different music stores and string those on his electric guitar. And because his fingertips were mashed up and numb and horribly mutilated, he had to tune down, which is the pioneering of the metal sound.
Yep.
But that looser string tension also lets him do all the Django Reinhardt trills and everything. So Black Sabbath is essentially, I think they're like the wallpaper of all dark and heavy music. They're so ubiquitous, they just disappear into the background. They're taken for granted. The only place I've almost ever seen them cited in punk and death rock specifically is like Rick Agnew really loves Tony Iommi. And Rick Agnew pioneered in a bunch of punk bands as well as Christian death.
Yeah. I mean, they're cited all the time with doom metal, but beyond that,
doom metal
lot.
is just slowed down Black Sabbath, though.
Yeah, it is.
Every band has its own sound, and that sound is if you slowed down a specific Black Sabbath song.
Right.
So anyway, I picked Paranoid because if you buy a Black Sabbath best of, a lot of the tracks are going to be off this album, except for like Hand of Doom and Rat Salad and
Yeah.
Occasionally fairies wear boots, but
Yeah. No, my first Black Sabbath album was definitely one of their best dub albums.
yeah.
And you're right, it is heavy paranoid.
And you can always rely on the first 4 or so albums to be pretty solid. And then they start doing mountains of cocaine and acres of weed and kind of get real weird. And even though they're all evil and heavy sounding, especially for the 60s, they hadn't developed the heavy metal aesthetic yet. So they're in like white, fringy, bell sleeve hippie shirts and brown suede jackets and have big mustaches and horrible bangs on long, straight hair and bell bottoms. They look
Yeah.
kind of ridiculous for a
Bunch of
metal
Jethro
band.
Tull band members playing sludgy music.
Interesting to note, in the middle of their early days, I think they maybe had one album out or right before. Tony Iommi was recruited for Jethro Tull for like 3 days.
Yeah.
And
Interesting.
he found it too militant, too precise, and
Yeah, I
like
could see that.
16-hour days in the studio rehearsing and stuff. And
Yeah,
was
which
like,
is
no.
interesting because they do cite Jethro Tull as one of their like big influences.
Yeah. Brief member.
Yeah.
So, let's see. I mentioned surf guitar made me pick up guitar. Black Sabbath made me want to like actually get good at it and learn my shit. So that's the rundown on Sabbath. I think they're essentially, if you took death rock and sucked all the punk out and left all the blues and grooves and a little hint of jazz. But you don't really hear them cited specifically just because they're, I think, just such an overwhelming influence. It's like being in a dad rock band and citing Led Zeppelin or the Stones or something. Like,
Yeah.
duh, what else would there be?
My guess is that death rock's influenced by Black Sabbath is probably always filtered through another band, at least.
That's
that
yeah.
took Black Sabbath
Mhm.
first, filtered it to them, and then death rock got it from that band.
And they
rather
were
than
probably
from
punk bands too.
Right.
Yeah.
I was thinking about that because I know, well, I mean, first of all, Black Sabbath has been music journaled to death, but I know they've come up in maybe 2, maybe 3 sort of history of goth books. And I think at least from what I can remember, a lot of it was referencing the album cover of their first album. But I don't know, listening to this, I was trying to think like, okay, what do I hear a goth genre in here? And I kind of came away from it thinking that either I'm not picking up on it because I'm not a musician and I'm not anywhere near as well versed in the technicalities of music as you 3 are, but I didn't hear anything that I was like, okay, I could say this would be an influence for this band. Like I was thinking about it, and even like the band Hawkwind, which was a band that Andrew Eldritch really likes, I can hear more direct comparisons from them than I would from Black Sabbath, other than what I know of them is that essentially they created metal and like all the different subgenres of metal. So that was sort of my thought was it, you know, a lot of stuff branches off from there and it mutates, and then eventually at some point goth picks up on some stuff.
Yeah, I think
I think sorry.
Well, just real quick on Hawkwind, that was Lemmy's band before Motorhead.
Yep.
And allegedly he tried to give Sid Vicious some bass lessons and said it was impossible.
Yeah, that makes sense.
If you listen to some like New Model Army, Gary Newman's punk band, if you listen to the live tracks, you can really hear like that kind of Hawkwind sound that Lemmy pioneered on the bass and everything, kind of in the air. And if you listen to Hawkwind next to Joy Division and listen to Peter Hook's bass, and then listen to some like early Susie and the Banshees, like Hawkwind is definitely a much more direct influence on the rhythm section. I know everybody always goes to the dub and reggae, and that's not to be underestimated. There's Led Zeppelin and Bauhaus both have like dub tracks.
Yeah.
It's no question.
Right.
But
My understanding was that Lemmy was far more involved in just hitting up a lot of places that had big music scenes at the time in the UK, so that could definitely be a factor. But Black Sabbath formed in Brighton, which is like on the
I think it was
very
Birmingham, wasn't it?
was it
Alabama?
Birmingham?
I think
thought
it's
it was
Birmingham.
Brighton.
No, I'm almost certain it's Birmingham because half of Judas Priest is also from there.
This is our European listeners' favorite part of the show when Americans try and talk about geography in Europe.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
You're
The
right.
English are
Birmingham.
tearing their hair out, and then all the Londoners are like, they're all Midlanders. Go fuck themselves.
They're dumping their beans in disgust.
As well they
right
should.
smack
I'm
in the
actually going to
middle
get canceled
of,
this time.
Let's go microwave some tea just to push it home.
It's the only way to drink it.
Yeah. Well, I know that Black Sabbath, their first 3 albums, I think, got really just torn apart in the well-read music press at the time, and a big factor for that
Makes
was
sense.
they used, what is it, like the devil's chord? They used tritones.
Oh yeah, that's right.
The
Yeah.
interval, yeah.
Which
Yes,
they're
the
now
myth
famous
of the devil's
for.
chord, which is totally not true.
It's all that devil's
But
lettuce.
metal bands like to propagate that myth so much.
Yeah, it did get called the devil's interval, but it was because it was devilishly fucking hard to play on a lot of instruments.
Yeah, it had nothing to do with being banned by the church in the Middle Ages. It never was. It was actually used very commonly in a lot of early polyphonic chant.
Yeah.
Yeah, just using discordant harmonies, which and what do they call them, like counter melodies, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, which you hear a lot in Red Hot Chili Peppers, which they're famous for.
Yeah.
Yep.
But
Also,
yeah, that was like a big thing with Black Sabbath, and they pulled in a lot of that occultism and got that imagery like stuck into heavy metal.
I think,
and their drummer did most of the lyrics, which is where you get a lot of the political stuff from.
Oh, that makes sense. Because I did think that was a bit funny, listening to the lyrical content and then thinking about the wild, like, alt-right things his wife has said, and just wondering where it all went wrong.
Well, I mean,
a lot of
Ozzy
bands
does have that though, where they were political in one way way back when they were in their teens and 20s,
and then they got rich,
become middle-aged,
and
they go ultra conservative.
I mean, I don't know where Bill Ward, I believe, is the drummer. It's not Geezer, he's the bassist. I don't know where he would stand today as a very old man politically, but I mean, I know they said they didn't like the Soviet Union, so they wouldn't identify as communists, but they were all working class dudes in post-war England that very obviously as outsiders thought Vietnam was monstrously stupid.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
and they love drugs.
I honestly don't think it's really age. I think it is the accumulation of wealth over time that sort of changes your political views. But
generally,
I don't know. I've met a lot of my fiance's friends that are in their 50s, coming up on their 60s, and some of them were just punks because they were reactionary. And so now they're reactionary to whatever is dominant now.
Haven't you heard conservatism is the new punk?
Just because you say it doesn't make it true.
And we're not going to have another election in 4 years.
Yeah, that's the story.
Only if we fuck up.
But yeah, that whole thing about punks, growing up or not growing up, but necessarily coming in the modern world and becoming all sort of quote unquote conservative because the mainstream is now the sort of progressive leftist thing, is that sort of realization of that old trope around, what would goths do if everyone loved black? When they're talking about goths being all contrary,
right?
When goths being, when they're portraying goths as being consciously counterculture rather than just happening to be counterculture.
Right. It's like when at the RNC they complain about the Marxist fascists without seeing the contradiction in those two things. Yeah.
Everything's the same if you don't know anything. That reminds me, I was going to say earlier with your Blutengel being a guilty pleasure thing, all pleasures can be guilty if you're fucked up enough.
Like how I was thinking about how good you must be at fingering when you're talking about all the guitar stuff.
I got all 5 fingers on the left hand.
And a crazy amount of precision.
They're very textured from years and years. Anyway,
I ribbed for her pleasure. Yeah. I'll share just a couple. I don't have a lot of thoughts, so I give a couple thoughts on the album because I never really listened to Black Sabbath, despite how popular they are. And even coming away from this, I tried to go into it with an open mind, but I had a really hard time overcoming my association of Black Sabbath with like middle-aged dads. And just because like I just picture my dad or my wife's dad, I can't like I couldn't completely separate it. Even as good, like the album was amazing. Like first of all, I was surprised that there was a jazz number 3 tracks in. I was like, what? I thought this was a metal album. What's happening? War Pigs, the drum fills and the guitar solos were amazing. There was some power metal, there was doom metal, there's this psychedelic feeling that did remind me of the Doors. You brought them up.
Besides Jimi Hendrix as an influence, and you can hear that in the guitars on those solos.
My favorite parts of the songs were really the kind of breakdowns and like stuff that felt like jam session kind of thing, because like Iron Man, for example, I'm not really a big fan of the main guitar lines of that song, which is the thing that gets played in movies and everybody hears, but these sort of ADHD rabbit hole diversions were really where the album shines for me. Like Hand of Doom just completely changes the song 2 minutes into the song, which is a lot of fun.
It's one of my favorite Sabbath songs, actually, and that one's never on any compilations.
Yeah,
That's interesting you compare it to jam sessions, though, because Ryan, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that a lot of this album is made up of sort of riffed off jam session tracks because it came out so quickly after their self-titled album.
Yeah, I don't know which specific tracks that was, but I do know that their first couple albums, they were basically just playing live sets with almost no overdubs, which is why the drumming kind of wanders in tempo and like stability a little bit, which is,
I like that.
I think, yeah, as time goes on and we get more and more attached to the grid in music production, you can really, really feel the human feel of the band flowing with the rhythm section and kind of breathing a little bit naturally. But I know Paranoid specifically, first of all, was not supposed to be the title track. The record company just wouldn't let them call it War Pigs.
I read that, yeah.
Yeah, which is why it has that crazy album cover with the ridiculous guy with the sword and helmet.
Or whatever.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, because of the war in Vietnam and they didn't want to upset people.
Yeah, too edgy. But that was one where they were like, yeah, your album's too short. Write another track. And they just banged it out in a few hours.
Wow.
And
I mean,
they just hit a groove.
I really was impressed with just the technical aspect and the prowess, not prowess, but whatever word I'm looking for, of the music was incredible. Like you could tell these were people that knew what they were doing, and it sounds really good.
And just gelled.
Yeah. I think Electric Funeral was another one of my favorites.
Yeah, that's definitely one of my favorites, especially the slower bits. But I love how the slow bits and the sort of freak out bits that you've been talking about you like so much I love the juxtaposition as it goes back and forth between those.
Like, I'm not a big fan of heavy wah wah on guitar. I think that was kind of a 70s thing. So that I didn't like that as much, but
That's
it
fair.
has this really good, like, swinging back and forth feel to it. Like, kind of, it reminded me of like a horror carnival or something. And it really does, like, to your point, Trey, gets across the emotions of being uncomfortable or unreal through the music. This sort of, because I think a lot of the album is about cultural anxiety and death and depression, and I really felt that vibe established musically on this song, which they did a great job because it wasn't over the top either. It was a bit more subtle, but you could feel it, and I think that was really impressive.
Indeed.
Any other?
I did feel like I need to go find the non-remastered version and listen to that, because we have a first pressing of Black Sabbath on our turntable, and the difference between that and the remaster is way noticeable. So I kind of want to go and find a non-remastered version of Paranoid.
Now so you're saying, is it just the difference you like, or do you actually like the older version better personally?
For Black Sabbath, for
yeah.
what is it, the eponymous album, the first one,
Yep.
I like the original better because it's grittier.
Okay.
And I kind of was wondering
they
if I'd get the same vibe for
overglossed it.
Paranoid.
Yeah,
it got smoothed out a little bit in the remaster.
Okay.
I've noticed on a lot of remasters, they tend to, over the decades, kind of gear it towards what systems people are listening to stuff on.
Yeah.
And a lot of the old analog stereo equipment, I think tubes and stuff kind of, and the format of a record kind of naturally compress stuff. And when they started putting stuff on tapes and CDs, they had a much bigger dynamic range to work with than on an LP, because like literally the physical grooves of the bass end, if they're too big, they will bounce the needle off the record. So
yeah, and I think I remember going back to Alien Sex Fiend, they had some issues when they were pressing some of their albums because their bass was too strong and tended to cut through the record. If it wasn't done correctly, they would tend to put a hole in the record.
And with more modern CD pressings too, you can look at charts of what the sound waves kind of look like song by song. I've seen it with like Metallica and Michael Jackson, and I would assume most bands, if they pay any attention to the remastering process, they just compress all of the sounds so the quiet is more loud and the loud is at the same level as the quiet.
Yeah, I saw a lot of that because I was very into tracking the whole loudness war debate from the early 2000s. So I saw all of those, totally brick walled waveforms when it's just a solid chunk of just
Personally, as a
sound with
DJ,
no
whenever I get
variance.
a brick walled track on my deck and I'm looking at the waveform, I'm just like, oh, I like that dynamic range.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do too, though I know I've struggled with DJing sometimes when I tried to throw like a classical piece into a set. It's like, this is a great piece, but it's so quiet here and I can't hear anything. So you need a little bit of that with some things to let those uber dynamic things come through. But yeah, they swung way too far to the overcompressed side of things, or right around the turn of the millennium.
I think it's also a matter of automation, because if you go back to like this era, Dark Side of the Moon, all of the mixing was before they had automated boards. Like if you've ever seen a big mixing board in a studio where they play a track and they move around on their own,
right?
That was not a thing. So what you hear on Dark Side of the Moon is Alan Parsons with like 10 knobs, and then the entire band and probably some assistants manually doing all of the levels to a master track. So it's almost like a live performance, and you get kind of a human feel, like a director drawing your attention to different things when it's that manual.
Mhm.
And now they just slap on tons and tons of compressors that brick wall it automatically.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah,
that whole
but
thing
Black
with the
Sabbath is
what?
a band where it is so apparent that limitations make for interest.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the whole idea with the sort of manual mixer, to go back to reggae and dub music, that was their sort of whole revelation to the music industry, was this idea that the mixing board itself could be a member of the band. It can be an album, or not an album. It can be an instrument in and of itself, just playing all those faders live, playing your
Yeah.
sends into various effects panels. And then, of course, I think Brian Eno also had the same sort of quotes around that sort of thing as, I like to play the
Board.
mixing desk. Yeah, play the
Yeah.
board rather
And
than a
then
traditional instrument.
that DIY approach translates into hip hop with people turning the turntables into instruments
Mm.
Mhm. Yep.
directly from the Caribbean. But
Yeah.
yeah, to your point, Danny, about it being like inescapably dad rock, that's almost what I'm saying. Like it's so ubiquitous in dark music that it just kind of fades into the background.
Mm.
Even
Yeah, I
if
feel
it's not
like
like the same punk rhythms,
yeah.
the themes and the feel of it kind of overshadow a lot of dark music.
It would probably be better for me to get a track list of like B-sides, because a lot of the the stuff that I've heard, the really popular songs, I kind of roll my eyes at, but they're a really good band, like technically, and the songs that I hadn't heard on here I could actually get into. So that might be what I need to sort of separate that association, but yeah.
Yeah, you start listening to their extended discography, at least in the Ozzy era, and you get like lots more songs like Planet Caravan, where it's just a quiet instrumental with like a flute or a Spanish guitar,
Mm.
Mhm.
which they're inventing metal, so nobody was there to be like, this isn't
You can't do
metal.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I guess, I mean, for me overall, I mean, I'm very familiar with Black Sabbath, and I've listened to most of their stuff. And Paranoid is a really solid album. I do really like Paranoid a lot. I'm kind of with everyone else. I'm more about the instrumentals than the vocals. I think Ozzy's a fine singer, but I mean, I'm not a huge Ozzy fan. The lyrics are solid, but just the vocal singing is okay.
Oh, I'm so
He's
glad you said that, because
oh,
I
he's
have felt the same thing, but I was like, I can't actually say this out loud because people are going to
Sure you
tell me I'm
can.
an idiot. But I also
No,
was
I-
like,
No,
I'm
he-
not a
agreement
big
too.
fan.
he just sings the guitar part.
That is my main critique. That's
Yeah.
the main thing I don't like, especially like Iron Man.
Yeah.
You know it really well for the riff, and it's some great instrumentals, but Ozzy is just doubling the guitar line with his voice, and that's another one of those random music pet peeves of mine. I like if you're going to have
Right,
multiple
yeah.
instruments doing melody lines, I want them to be working with melody counter melody,
Mhm.
not with just doubling.
Yeah.
You can dig up some live tracks of Ronnie James Dio after Ozzy's era, where they've got to go play the hits on tour, even though they have an all new album where he's singing about rainbows and elves. You can hear him play Ozzy's songs that everyone is familiar with and going to hear, and he tries to put a little bit more of his own stank on him, I would
Yeah.
say.
I mean, to be fair, I'm not a huge Dio fan either. He gets
Yeah.
he's a little too clean a singer, actually. He's a little too clean, operatic,
He actually
and a
started
little
off
bit
in
more
like,
power metal-y for me too, which I'm not a
Yeah, I
huge
like
power
Dio.
metal guy. That's fine.
well, he started off in doo-wop.
Oh, really?
Actually,
I could definitely see that. Yeah, I can see
yeah, he was like Ronald Dio and the Letter Tops or something weird.
that.
When I was younger, I listened to a lot of like ska and two-tone and that kind of thing. And I enjoy when that sneaks into other genres.
Mhm.
Indeed.
Skank in a circle. All right. Trey. Yes.
Oh, did Azzy, did you have any notes on influences or blues or anything? Or is that for another discussion?
For your next
if you ever
YouTube
wanted
video.
to hear my next YouTube video, which I need to write because I have so many thoughts and this is helping synthesize those thoughts. But yeah, Black Sabbath set out with the objective of being just a heavy blues band in the style of UK blues, and you can hear that so much in their music. And if you listen to a lot of much older like US blues, you can hear basically where Ozzy picks up his vocal style.
Yeah, a bit.
Oh,
Yeah.
that slight tangent on that. I always think, because I sometimes get compared to like Jim Morrison or Danzig vocally. I actually, like, through enough music nerdery, traced Jim Morrison's vocal style to Frank Sinatra, and Frank Sinatra's main influence was Billy Holiday.
Holiday, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
He learned
Billie
how to
Holiday
sing
makes
from
a
Billie
bit more
Holiday.
sense.
So, and Jim Morrison influenced a whole bunch of early goth vocalists.
Oh,
So,
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
so Billie Holiday is the grandmother of goth.
I mean, she does have Gloomy Sunday
Mm-hmm.
and Strange Fruit. The Gloomy Sunday is more goth oriented.
Indeed. Anyway, well, if that's all for Black Sabbath, let's get into
Yeah.
Trey's heathenry.
Hur kan jag därom tala vis med mildhet? Kan inte göra ogjort eller byta namn. Innan du må bli förlåten så bit huvudet av skam. Jag svär att jag då aldrig velat göra ont. Men vart jag än ser nu och om jag än ber så gör jag dig illa. Natten är stilla men syndaren är vaken och varje timmen här. Jag sagt att jag dig älskar, det är också sant. Men jag kunde också säga att jag älskar en annan. Jag ville inte äta med dräggelkäften ulv. Skulle också göra det för dess egen skull. I min ensamhet för ingen annan vet. Jag älskar ju båda och plågas av det. Utan ett straff och utan en skuld. Bara ett jag minns är att varje timmen finns. I min ensamhet för ingen annan vet. Jag älskar ju båda och plågas av det. Utan ett straff och utan en skuld. Bara ett jag minns är att varje timmen finns. stund. Luther har gått hem och jag vill kyssa din mun. Sen ska jag bestämma, det finns ännu tid. Jag ser väl vad som händer, det är mitt liv. Jag svär att jag då aldrig velat göra ont en värld jag ser nu. Om jag än ber så gör jag det illa. Natten är stilla men syndaren är vaken och varje timmen här. I min ensamhet för ingen annan vet. Jag älskar ju bara och plågas av det. Utan ett straff och utan en skuld. Bara ett jag minns är att varje timmen finns. Innan denna dag jag såg mig som ett lamm. Och så vill jag vara och så vill jag bliva. Jag vill titta lika, att det ska ge vika. Och nu uppstiger solen och varje timmen flyr.
Trey, introduce us to Tra.
Yes. All right. So yes, I chose Tra by the band Hednagarna, which, as Ryan kind of prefaced, does translate to the heathens. So it's all heathenry and pagan stuff. So
I'm so glad, because I didn't know that, but that was a big vibe that I enjoyed on this album.
yeah,
Felt pagan,
And tra means wood.
it does. It's also
which
a
is what I
pun.
had listening to the. Sorry.
It's also a pun because it's very close to the word tre, which is three, and it's the third album. So
Nice.
they called, and the second album was basically called two as well. So they're interesting that way. But their first album was just self-titled. But yeah, so here's my little blurb about them. So Hednagarna is a Swedish folk revival band that was formed in the late 80s. Their first self-titled album was pretty much a straightforward Swedish folk record, using mostly homemade traditional instruments because the founder, Anders Steck, was also a trained luthier. So he would make a lot of fiddles and things like that they used initially. So that was their first album, which is very sort of semi-traditional. But after the first album, they decided to really sort of significantly change up their sound. First off, they added a pair of Finnish women for singers, because initially the band was just sort of the three instrumentalists. So it was mostly pretty instrumental with some singing of folk songs. But the pair of Finnish singers really added something to it in that they really like to bring in a lot of the vocal harmonies, with the two singing in counterpoint with one another. And then they also embraced electronics. On that first album, they primarily were just amplifying the traditional instruments. So they added a lot of, amplification, some distortion to make some interesting sounds. But they did also do some synthesized elements, for like drone elements or some sampling, looping type stuff. The 1992 album, their second album, Kaksi, was the first one that, as far as I could find, the first album in the whole sort of folk revival scene in Scandinavia that really started to mesh that idea of, let's take traditional folk music, amplify some of the instruments to bring in a little bit of that rock thing, and then also have some electronic instruments and some electronic production techniques to just sort of bring this amalgamation of multiple different styles, but still having that core folk music.
Yeah, you definitely hear that.
Yeah. And then the third album, which is Tra, the one we listened to here, which was released in 1994, is usually, from what I could read online of various reviews, is where most reviewers really think they really established that folk / rock / electronic sound. That, at least in one interview, at some point, I read that the band termed folk rave.
Sure.
I don't know if I really vibe with that
No.
fully. It's not electronic enough that in my mind to say folk rave, because it really is still pretty heavy folk rock. The electronic stuff is a very good textural element, but it's not enough of a dominating presence to my taste or to my mind to really fall in the folk rave. But it does amuse me, that term. So I did like that.
It's not. It doesn't have the same ring as like Graver or something.
It doesn't. It doesn't. No,
Graver?
I think Graver was a great. As much as I really don't like,
it's like cybergoth kind of.
Yeah, goth raver
better,
is what the Graver is for the most part.
Spooky
But it has sort of a double entendre, or sort of a triple meaning there, because Graver as a a combination of goth and raver, but also grave.
Exactly. Yeah.
So it had a lot of extra meanings there. So it's a very clever thing that they made up for music I just totally don't care for.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah,
Grave to the grave.
the first time I had heard Hednagarna was actually on a compilation album from Northside Records. The album was called Nordic Roots. It's a whole series, but it was I bought the first one. I had been interested in the sort of quote unquote world music scene for several years at that point. I started by getting into Celtic music in sort of the early to mid 90s, which was really the big thing at that point. And I was into it for quite a while and into all things Celtic and buying all that until I got quite sick of it because of course my family discovered that I liked Celtic things, and so every Christmas from every member of the family I would get something with a Celtic cross or Celtic jewelry or Irish
Yeah, that'll
themes
kill
or
it.
stuff like that, and I got a little bit sick of it. I found that especially during the 90s when Celtic sort of hit the zeitgeist and became popular with Enya and the other Celtic sort of popularization bands, Clanad and the like, that it started to veer towards new age music. And I've never been a big fan of new age music as much as I like ambient and other quote unquote wallpaper musics. There's just something about the sort of kind of like they talked about the filing of the edges off of industrial to become EBM, then to become future pop. The same thing kind of happened with some musics to turn into the quote unquote new age. It lost all of the edges and became this very comforting and easy music for anybody to get into. And I have always liked the weird musics and weird sounds. So when something starts to become a little bit overplayed and a little bit simplified to appeal to a more mass market audience, I tend to drift out of it.
Okay, so you don't care for spa music.
Not a lot of it, no. It depends on the spa, but yeah, a lot of spas and
My wife hates it
relaxation
too.
things. It's not my thing.
When
I mean,
we go
I'll,
to her therapist, I'm always like, "Oh, I'm entering a state of zen," and she's like, "I want to break this speaker. I don't want to listen to this."
So it's the opposite of ska music, where instead of you pick it up, you let it go, let it go.
Yeah, exactly.
Pick it up, pick it up, pick it up.
So yeah, this album sort of came as that sort of interest in Celtic music was really waning, but I was into world music and would regularly go out to the local independent music shop at the college downtown area where I was in Champaign. And I'd always dig through the world music section. And this particular compilation album caught my eye because it had a big old sticker on it that loudly proclaimed that this album was cheaper than food. And I just thought that was so hilarious. The album was actually, I think it was $3.99, which
That's pretty cheap.
is pretty cheap and is arguably cheaper than a lot of food. So it was a pretty accurate sticker. So yeah, so I got the album, brought it home. When I first put the album on, I was immediately struck by how sort of raw and just sort of real the music was in comparison to all the overproduced, new ageified Celtic music that I was getting sick of. And I also noticed how similar it was in feel to that sort of core of Irish and Celtic music, which surprised me at first until I thought a little bit about the history of the British Isles and all the delightful Scandinavian uh, mixings, not quite so voluntary mixings, but cultural mixings from between Scandinavia and the British Isles. So it's like, okay, no, I can totally see why Scandinavian music would sound very similar to Celtic music, but it's like
Yeah.
it's that core of Celtic music that I loved without all of the fun edges and the raw primitivism that was sort of filed off by modern Celtic production. So I was like, oh, this is really, really exciting to me to hear this stuff that sort of revitalized my interest in especially European world music, but still world music in general. And I still have a love of world music, but I'm always seeking stuff from other corners of the world that I haven't experienced yet. So yeah, but then the highlight of this compilation, which did have 3 tracks by Hednagarna of it, but really the one that really grabbed me and I listened to over and over again was the track Raven by Hednagarna.
Mm-hmm.
That track just, when I first heard it come on, I'm like, what is this? This is so different. Because a lot of the album was still pretty, it felt like folk music. It was rawer folk music, more traditional seeming folk music, but Raven was something else. It was just weird and interesting
Mm-hmm.
as it comes in with the sort of just the breathing. It just starts off with this rhythmic breathing sound that was like, what is happening here? This is really, really awesome sounding. So that's the track that introduced me to Hednagarna. And so I, sought out, what is this band? Where did this come from? And that's what brought me to Tra, which is the album it was released on. So after that, I quickly purchased and or downloaded most of the Hednagarna discography. But Tra really was the one that still stuck with me, and Raven is still probably my favorite track.
It's a great
Hednagarna.
Great song, yeah.
Yeah. So I also did start introducing that track into my DJ sets at the little weekly independent club that our scene ran. At the rented out the second floor of a local bar, brought our own equipment, set up in there. We had a fun little scene with a goth set, an industrial set, and an 80s set is usually how it worked out. But I definitely was introducing Raven into that. And it actually caught on a bit. And so a couple of other DJs in the scene started playing it and getting it in. Unfortunately, the track that really kind of gelled as a scene floor filler was Thule, which is a fine track.
Which number is that?
That is track 9.
Okay. Yeah, I'm trying to remember. There were a couple that I thought like, okay, this sounds like it could be sort of in the vein of something you'd hear at a goth club with a more dancey kind of.
So Thule has a pretty strong 4 on the floor beat. It's a pretty standard. It fits in with the club kind of feel. So I'm sure that's why it gravitated. But I'm like, not my favorite track. I like it. It's still a good track, but it just wasn't my favorite. So that's kind of the my history with Hednagarna. And there's a lot of other bands that I like. I think I've mentioned Garmarna is in the past. That's another band that I quite enjoy. That probably has my favorite track for like Nordic folk revival music that I've gotten played at a few goth clubs. But yeah, so this is a great album that I just love listening to it, re-listening to it. It definitely holds up. I haven't listened to it in a while because I'm always listening to new things. I don't do old things very often, though it's very possible, Danny, that you might have heard at least one of these tracks before. I don't know if you've ever watched the Witcher 2 trailer. Or if that was before your Witcher.
Oh,
Varg Timon is in the Witcher 2 trailer, is the main track under the Witcher 2 trailer.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense because they did do a lot of the music for all those games. They reached out to like Scandinavian bands that played like authentic instruments and things. And I don't remember the names of all of them, but I did see like a little mini documentary on that. So that doesn't surprise me at all. Yeah, I can totally hear that.
Yeah, so track 3 was in that trailer.
Isn't The Witcher based in Slavic mythology mostly?
Polish,
yeah.
Yeah, it's Poland's mythology for the most part, but that whole region, the Germanic tribes were all over those areas and coming out of Scandinavia and Germany. So I'm sure there's a lot of cross-pollination. And, they're just trying to pick things that sort of sound witchy. Right. And, Varg Timon is about werewolves, and that's what The Witcher is about, is monsters and being a monster slayer. So I totally see it.
My impression of the album was just broad strokes, a little bit like not strictly a Scandinavian or specific kind of ethnic folk sound. It was a little more world music-y.
Mm-hmm.
Like Dead Can Dance, but like actually danceable.
Ooh. Hot take.
You get the Swedish pop producers in there and all the wavy arms and velvet bell sleeves. Kind of have to scoot off the floor for a minute.
That's fair.
Sorry.
Those are my wavy arms and my bell sleeves that are scooting you off the dance floor.
Go back to the Ren Fair, nerd.
Damn straight. I'll be there next week.
With your polycule playing D&D. Wait, are you going next week?
On the 10th. I'll be going with Melinda.
Oh, okay, because that's when the Fairy Fest is.
Oh, is it? I mean,
which is where I'll be going, I think. Hopefully. If I have money in my bank account, I will.
I'll obviously not go on the 10th, but I might go that Sunday. We'll see.
We should all give ourselves wedgies on principle.
Do you ever get out to the Ren Fair out there in Colorado? Because you have a good one out there. That was my first Ren Fair.
I do, but I'm usually like broke or busy.
Yeah, that's the problem with Ren Fairs is they're kind of spendy.
Yeah.
It's basically you pay to go to a mall and eat expensive food.
I really like saying hi to the elephants for whatever reason. Whenever I've gone, they go out of their way to like want to touch me with their trunk. So
yeah, that is fun. That is, I don't.
The elephants and I have something in common.
Yeah, I don't see very many Ren Fairs with elephants, but the Colorado one, I've been there since I was a little one going to that fair back in the 80s.
And now I'm old and broke and I'm just dreading traffic on I-25.
Yeah, that's fair.
Anyway.
Trey, let me ask you, in the words of my son, what the fuck is this cover supposed to be?
I think this is suppository, isn't it?
If you're brave enough.
I thought it was a rat bat.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with probably a nail bat of some stripe, but I don't know. It could be a traditional weapon. I have no idea what the cover is.
Okay, all right. Well, yeah, no, I was gonna say I am glad that you suggested this album because leading up to this episode, I was considering an album by Helium Vola or Quintal, or like even Corvus Corax or Dynalakayan, because I always, that was always part of the goth scene for me when coming up in the 2000s. Neo-medieval music, neo-Victorian, dark ambient, Gregorian chants. These were all genres I'd hear at club events or from like on YouTube videos of Wave Gothic Treffen. And while I do think like the comparisons we've made for this album are accurate, where it is more on the like Ren Fair pagan side of the goth to hippie spectrum, whatever I just made up.
It's fair.
It's a thing.
I think that and while like bands like Quintal or Corvus Corax are on the other side, it is that ghost of the goth adjacent thing where it's like bands that you'll hear but they're not goth, but they definitely have things in there that are goth or intermingle with the community in interesting ways. And so it again kind of brings that question back up. But I loved this album because of the pagan association, that I kind of felt this sort of like reference to some ancient past, some ancient deities, kind of like grounded in nature or something. And then again with a little bit of that goth aesthetic in there, or echo of a goth aesthetic. And so it felt very comfortable to me listening to this, like a velvet skirt that I've had forever, while having that sort of like transcendental aspect to it that for me immediately kind of shifts the way I feel. To compare it to Quintal or Helium Vola, those bands' albums are very consistent, which is not a bad thing. Like, you know what you're going to get.
Yeah.
Whereas this album I found did play with a lot of different moods and styles in kind of surprising ways. And just some of the examples I had was, I thought track 4 had a very brief 70s style guitar riff that gave it this kind of serpent-like quality that I sort of associated with Dark Cabaret a little bit. Track 5 sounded more like a dark folk song. I think there was a hurdy-gurdy in there, and there's the acoustic
They
guitar
definitely
and hand
play.
drums.
Yeah, they have hurdy-gurdies in this album. There's several hurdy-gurdies on
Yeah.
these tracks.
That was
I
one
meant
that
to ask.
Yes, please.
Oh, just quick thing, Trey. Do you know if there was Hardanger fiddle in there?
Absolutely. Yeah, there was Hardanger fiddle on there. Yeah.
Okay.
And I think on I think one of the very distorted sounds on Min Skog is an amplified Hardanger fiddle. So yeah, there's
That's
definitely Hardanger
cool.
fiddle on there. I like the Hardanger fiddle a lot.
My fiddle had a Hardanger as well.
I bet it did.
Just for folks who don't know, it's a Scandinavian violin with a bunch of drone strings.
Yeah, it's got a lot of
Oh.
sympathetic strings that resonate with the actual strings that are being played to give it an
Yeah.
interesting extra texture to it. And it also adds a lot of extra texture when you amplify that and put it through a bit of a distortion too.
Mhm.
Feedback City.
Mhm. Yeah, but
Cool.
yeah, there's definitely some Hardanger fiddle, which I love.
Cool. I didn't mean to interrupt your flow.
Oh, you're
there.
fine.
I just had to know.
What else? Oh, I thought track 8 had this sort of track 8 was really interesting because it had a folk vibe to it, but I felt like it was built like a rock song where there was this sort of kind of like 80s rock ballad aspect with the folk stuff in there, which was a really good peanut butter in my chocolate kind of moment for me as well. So I really liked the way that they incorporated a lot of different musical, elements, and it wasn't just the one, here's the drum circle at the end of the Renaissance Fair kind of thing.
Right. Yeah. Cool.
What'd you think, Azzy?
I wish I could point to specific tracks because every time I listen to this, I just kind of went on the journey of the album. And I liked where on some tracks you couldn't really identify like what specific like folk vibe they were going for, but whatever it was a kind of in a sense traditionally opposed to the instrumentation that they used, because there's such a rich use of instrumentation on this album, with where you don't have the same combinations track by track, and so it always adds something a little bit different. And I liked a lot of the rock elements, and I liked the fact that the vocals, when they had them, were very much used as just another instrumentational layer instead of, like Black Sabbath singing along with the guitar.
Yeah, there's a lot of interplay between the instruments and the vocals. There wasn't a lot of doubling. There was more, the two vocalists did a lot of vocal interplay, sometimes with different timings. The instruments were supporting and playing around with the vocals and with each other. And
I wish I could remember which track it was because, like I said, I just kind of went on the journey of this album. But there's one track specifically towards the end that the dissonance really gave me anxiety.
That might be the last track. That one. Because that has a fair amount of
which one it is.
Yeah.
I would have to, instead of closing my eyes when I would listen to this, go back and like actively watch, like, okay, what track are we on? But for there it was more just the track focused more on like high tones. Without sort of, the underlying like lower hertz textural layers.
Okay. Yeah, I really suspect it is the last track you're thinking of.
It's a very real possibility, because the track that stood out to me the most, the one that I liked the most, was Varg Timmen. And it was simply because it stood out from the album as a whole, just in terms of the vocals that were on it. But also in sort of it felt, in a sense, it felt more raw than a lot of the other tracks. I mean, because you can't say that this is hyper polished. Like, it is very much like human music. But Varg Timmen just had a lot more of that grit, and it really stood out to me.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, Skog is probably the grittiest one for me because that's the one that has a lot of heavy distortion on like all of the instruments. But Varktimon's definitely up there too.
But I was surprised at how much I liked this
Good. That's what I
because
like to hear.
it keeps your interest throughout the entire album, which is not something that I can usually say for folk music or world music.
Yeah.
Yeah,
There's just
they tend to take a element of whatever culture they're pulling from and just beat it to death.
yes, exactly. So listening to sort of the ebb and flow of this was really enjoyable. Because it really did like transport you. And sometimes you'd be listening and you're like, that almost sounds like a zither playing Celtic music.
Okay. Yeah.
Although I don't believe there was a zither, but
I mean, there might have been, I don't know. I mean, the zither is that there's a lot of different styles of zithers because it's more of a generic instrument category. And there may
yeah.
have been some. I'm not sure what Scandinavian instruments would fit in the zither category, but yeah, it wouldn't surprise me because I mean they have a lot of different stringed instruments that they play throughout. As you already pointed out, there's a lot of variety in different combinations of instruments that happens throughout the album.
I know I was looking at their Wikipedia page and seeing all of the instruments that were attributed to the band, and I was like, whoa,
Yeah,
half of these I don't even know what they sound like on their own.
that's a
I thought you
YouTube
made the word
dive for
zither
you
up.
guys.
Oh yeah, hither, tither, zither.
Zither me timbers. Sorry, we're really getting off track now.
That's what we do.
Well, so good. So how did you feel returning to this? How did it strike you now? Or was there anything specific you wanted to highlight on this?
Um, Not really. I mean, as far as how it made me feel is, it just I still love it. It's still a great album. It's still, I mean, I no longer am tired of uh quote unquote world music because I was just listening to one because I've listened to so many different musics now and there's so many more for me to discover all the time.
Hmm.
But just coming back to this and remembering how it kind of pulled me back from the edge of being like, all right, this world music thing is just it's kind of dumb now. It's been played out and coming back to something that is real and raw and not that's been filtered through uh the sort of popular record industry lens for an American audience that the record industry believes can't handle things that are not within very strict parameters of music that Americans like. Um, was just it was great to feel that raw sound again. So I did really enjoy it, and I
Yeah.
have seen them live. It was many years ago, back in like I want to say it was the late '90s or early
Oh, wow.
2000s. Um, I saw that they were playing in a world music festival. I think it was in Indiana. I don't remember exactly where. And me and a couple of friends from college trucked out there, and they were amazing live. It was a real good time to see them up there on stage playing live. So that was definitely a highlight of my experience with them.
All right. Well, on that note, well, actually, let me just, for completely selfishly, um, thank you guys for doing this with me because this was a lot of fun. I really needed that. Can I have both of you, Azzy and then Ryan, share where we can all find you online for anyone who, for some reason, doesn't already know?
Ryan, you can go first.
Oh, thank you. Let's see. I am Ryan Flint on most of the social media. I spend too much time on Facebook like a boomer, just like my music taste. Really enjoying Threads because I always liked Twitter before its transition to fascism. Instagram. I sing for the band Witch Hands and also make the merch. So anyone with late orders, come complain at me. I'll send you extra shit if I can. I think that's large. Oh, I own a secondhand gothy punky store in Colorado Springs called the Arbitrarium. And
It's a dope store.
Thank you.
You got a good patch and sticker collection, and just a lot of like off the wall stuff that you don't see in other places, which is nice.
We try and have a little of everything because it's called the Arbitrarium. I just started getting rid of my massive fucking book collection. So since I have a store that started off for getting rid of our extra clothing, it's now filling up with books. We have a big old coffin shelf and a 100-year-old sofa
Hell
we just
yeah.
put in the back, and a 60s reading light and oriental carpets and stuff. So you can chill out where the cameras can see you and read.
Now you just
We
need a
like to
coffee mug.
watch. Anyway,
Pop an
come
edible, you'll have a great time.
yeah, come drop off your used trip pants and assorted lip service things.
I actually
battered
have some
Doc
of those.
Martens.
Yeah.
Yeah, come visit. Empty your suitcase. Trade in for new stuff.
I found the other day a trip trench coat that I bought in
Really?
2006. And I can't believe I wore that garish thing, but I guess it's cool again now. So, you know,
For real.
that was, speaking of Blutengel, that was my mysterious creature of the night with some black leather gloves and a cane walking around the mall. Anyway.
You should really bring that back. But as far as stuff I've got on the horizon, Witch Hands is re-recording its first album.
Hell yeah.
Now that we're like good musicians and halfway good at producing something, some of the songs are getting a full rewrite and some are just getting competently performed. So keep an eye out for that. And my store occasionally does art shows. Some point, hopefully this year, I have a bunch of original drawings by Mark Freeth, the singer of Ausgang.
Oh,
I'm going to try and do an art show with maybe some locals or some guitars I've customized or something, and get little blurbs from his Ausgang book he's working on for each of the paintings. So
nice.
That sounds awesome.
yeah. All the snooty Denverites who don't visit, maybe I'll get some people from Chicago and Tampa and all the other places. Show them up.
worth the trip.
Yeah. Colorado Springs people visit Denver. Denver people do not visit the Springs. Such is life.
Colorado
It's
Springs is where Focus on the Family is.
It is.
That's what I
And
know.
NORAD
But
and
despite
the
that, it is
military
also a
academy.
really great town. I loved Colorado Springs so much.
Yeah, the alternative and queer scene here is thriving, but because of the right-wing pushback, it's also more subversive. So
A little bit, but it's okay because they just don't ask, don't tell out there anyways.
oh, we tell.
I'd like to
Anyway.
ask. Azzy, what do you got?
All right, I'm Azzy. You can find me on social media. Obscure Undead in I think all the places. I don't post on TikTok though. I actually post really sporadically, but on our YouTube channel, I do a weekly mix with whatever new shit I can find that fits in the like nebulous gothy music sphere that also doesn't get me copyright struck on YouTube. So those are really cool. Response to those has been awesome. And I'm currently working on looking into no, I'm looking into getting it all migrated over to Spotify podcasts
Ooh,
for
excellent.
easier listening for everyone.
Nice. Hopefully it's
But
also on Pocket Casts because that's what I use right now.
Pocket Casts. I
If
probably have to use
they're-
something like Podbean or something to get it everywhere. I did
Yeah,
that.
if you have an RSS feed, it'll be on there, but you'd have to.
Yeah. Otherwise,
Post
I'm
that.
on Instagram as underscore DJ Azzy underscore. And I try to post fun stuff to my stories, even if I don't post in my feed. Usually just, oh my gosh, we're all mentally broken. Here's something encouraging.
Shark facts.
And I need to post more shark facts because, yeah, I think it's hilarious that cookie cutter sharks kind of look like dicks
That's fair.
or chest bursters, whichever.
Ooh, yeah.
I mean,
Gotta
same
have more
thing.
pictures of whale sharks. Whale sharks are probably one of the more terrifying sharks out there.
Terrifying, but they're so pretty. They have stars.
They are very pretty, but just seeing
And
them, especially if you see them like by divers with their mouth open,
yeah,
it's
same
just
with,
like,
I think
okay.
basking sharks are more scary because they are just a giant gaping maw. But if you want a fact
Mhm.
about whale sharks, female whale sharks can have up to 300 pups in a single litter because they are capable of storing sperm and then inseminating only a small batch of that litter and then just kind of emitting a continuous stream of pups over the course of a year.
Wow.
Okay, nice. Yeah,
Wow.
there are a lot of fish
I
that
also
tend to store
sperm.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but you're
but
not.
do you birth?
Yeah, that's
No,
the
I
thing.
don't.
You're not also the gestator of
Yeah.
the species.
I'd
Is your
be more
persona a
impressed if.
seahorse?
Ooh.
That's what's that
I'd be-
fetish where you're like inflating your stomach? That's what that is.
I used to know the word for that, and now I don't.
It's not
I
vor.
think
That's
it's
eating.
inflation.
Yeah,
I think
vor
it's
was
just
the first thing that was
inflation.
coming to mind for me too.
Yeah.
But yeah,
I
it's
know
not that.
inflation, but I don't know. Maybe the word I
That's-
knew was different
That's Biden's
in
America.
German.
It's bloatophilia. It's just bloatophilia. That's what we'll go with.
Okay. Yeah.
That
Gotcha.
sounds so much worse.
Okay.
Ryan, we
Yeah,
need
usually when I get
a Shark Facts bumper now as well, if you can get on that with your music production skills. Thanks.
no, usually when I feel sad, like I've just started posting shark facts to Danny and Ryan because I'm just like,
And
Why
we
limit it?
appreciate it.
Yeah, we do. It's a nice distraction from the world burning down around us.
yeah, and
Yeah.
you get a
Like,
steady
hey,
stream of them.
Sharks
always
exist and they will fuck you up.
I mean, I could give you a sad shark fact.
They're endangered?
Approximately, they estimate
can't eat cheesecake?
11,000 sharks are killed every minute.
Oh my
Yeah,
god.
it doesn't
Wow.
surprise me.
Minutes?
They're caught in
Holy shit.
gill netting or for shark fin soup.
Fin soup. Yep, the shark fins is really heinous. But yeah, there's a lot of the whole. It's fine to make dolphin safe tuna, but I'd like to see some shark safe tuna too.
That
Yeah,
would be
but
really
not-
cool.
They're not charismatic mammals.
Well, dolphins are fucking rapists, so
Yes, they are horny little bastards that
Yeah.
have no boundaries.
And they will use headless fish as fleshlights.
Yes.
yeah,
they
that's
will.
right. Oh fuck. That's something I tried to forget, Ryan.
A lot of sharks have two penises, and they're called claspers, and they're not actually penises. They are specifically claspers. They're more of a cartilaginous appendage.
Wow.
There's another band name.
Cartilaginous appendage.
All right.
To answer your question real quick, Azzy, I was looking at the instrument list you mentioned on the Wikipedia, and the
Mhm.
Hummel is zither family.
Ah,
I don't know if
gotcha.
there are any
Okay.
on this album,
Is
but
that
it is
the-
listed as one of the memories.
That's the dip made of seeds, right?
Yes. The
Okay.
dip made of seeds that you put the pitha
Chickpeas,
in.
rather, is what I meant.
Right.
Yeah,
You
Danny,
mean
pro tip,
bougie
if you
bean
skin
dip?
your chickpeas. Danny, if you skin your chickpeas, you won't get the shits.
I will keep that in mind for the next time I have chickpeas. That's good to know. Although sometimes I do like having a good shit, though, to be fair.
Well,
feel
good
like
shit
we
and
should've-
the shits are two very different things.
I feel like we should have cut this recording a while ago.
This is the new podcast I'm launching alongside Cemetery Confessions. There's just
Random
disgusting
facts.
nonsense. Yeah.
Yeah.
Facts that will not enhance your life. Guaranteed.
Ryan and Azzy and Trey, thank you again for joining us on this episode. Before we go, I'm going to actually shift the tone of this episode for a moment here. That's because I need to share the news, if you haven't seen, of the passing of DJ Mary Millions. Mary was a friend of mine. She brought joy and hope to the lives of so many people. And I know that sounds generic, but If you were ever in the presence of and affected by her humor or her honesty about addiction and depression and poverty, and experienced how she would take her time to lend a listening ear or share a story from her life to bring hope and wisdom into yours, then you'll understand what that means. This is the second time a guest from this show and personal friend of mine has died. And as many emotions as I have wrapped up inside me right now, I've realized how lucky I am to have been able to share Mary with the world through this podcast. If you don't know, she was on the Gothquisition 6, as well as an episode titled The Future of Goth Spaces. And in light of these events, I've realized how valuable Cemetery Confessions is as a preservation of the voices in our community. Mary will live on in the hearts of many of us, and being able to revisit those episodes and hear her voice brings immense comfort to many people. I've been humbled over this last year to hear from friends and family of Misty, who you may know as Sanctus Manium, sharing with me how meaningful it was to be able to have episodes of Cemetery Confessions with them on there, and to be able to revisit Misty's voice and personality and reflect on and take comfort in that. And I have been so humbled and so honored to be able to play a very small part in the legacy and the memory of these wonderful people. And I think in this way, I have taken now seriously an aspect of this podcast that I didn't foresee, which is, like I said, the preservation of the voices of our scene. There are so many beautiful, creative people out there doing incredible work that may not otherwise have a lot of public-facing content. And so I'm grateful that I can facilitate that. Mary, I miss you. Many of us miss you. I'm thankful that you are no longer suffering. I do want to say that, I'm no stranger to depression, to forming harmful habits to try and alleviate suffering, both in myself, my family, my friends around me. I've seen many of us go through that. It's something I'm reaching out for help for right now, because there are a lot of personal, financial, and health issues that have been absolutely overwhelming. And I just want to encourage everyone listening, if you are experiencing anything similar, to please reach out to a therapist, reach out to a loved one. I kind of roll my eyes when people on public platforms make these recommendations, because it always feels so impersonal. It always feels so cookie cutter, boilerplate, generic. I want to let you know, if you're struggling with being suicidal, with standing on the precipice of a gaping maw of the abyss, with anxiety that is so severe you can't function, to even bathe yourself, to feel completely isolated and alone and hopeless. It's not an easy thing to ask for help, and a lot of times we wait for others to offer, and a lot of times that offer doesn't come. But I can tell you that there are people who love you. There are resources and support systems that can lead you to some form of relief, even if you're someone like my wife who has struggled with depression for the better part of 10 years and has gone through many different treatments, many different medications and therapies, and still struggles to find the ability to function, the will to carry on. There are ways to find a healthier space, to find a happier place. And nothing is permanent. Everything is temporary. And learning to embrace the ephemerality, to find gratitude in the small things that we have, and not live as concretely in these future catastrophizing states, can be very powerful. It doesn't mean we will never feel that way again, but there is love and peace to be found in little places. So I could honestly speak on this subject for quite a while, but I wanted to extend my my love and my heart to those who were friends of Mary, and those who maybe didn't know Mary but have been going through grief for the loss of someone else. Obviously, death is something we talk about a lot on the show, and I'm honored to have had the privilege of meeting Mary, talking with Mary, messaging Mary, and that is something that will stay with me until I leave this mortal coil. So with that more somber note, I would like to close the episode with a song. And as I was thinking about this and editing this episode, I did feel I was a bit too harsh on Blutengel as a reflection of my actual feelings towards the band, because I do have a lot of love for Blutengel, both emotionally and musically. And there are still genuinely a lot of songs that elicit a very deep, powerful experience of emotion for me, even if it's sometimes handled a bit clumsily. There's a lot of pathos in the band, and I've realized I do still have a deep love for their music. So I'd like to close this episode with one of my favorite songs of theirs, and a song that I think is even tangentially, emotionally encompassing of mourning, of the complicated dynamics of relationships, and just a song that's been part of my life for a long time. So with that, I'll close out the episode. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being a part of Cemetery Confessions. Thank you to everyone who has decided to support us financially. That has made more of an impact in my life than you know. And until next time, stay dark.
Everything for me, protect me from the shadows. You hold me when I'm falling, chase all the bad dreams away. You heal me when I'm calling you, wash away my tears. My blood is poisoned, my soul is aching. I'll die for you once more. But once you hurt me, and I can't forget the pain. The razor blades inside my soul, inside my soul. I tried to forget you, I tried to love you, but I hurt you all the time. I can't forget you, I'm afraid to touch you, and I always see you cry. I tried to forget you, I tried to love you, but I hurt you all the time. I can't forget you, I'm afraid to touch you, and I always see you cry. Everything for me, protect me from the shadows. You hold me when I'm falling, chase all the bad dreams away. You heal me when I'm calling you, wash away my tears. My blood is poisoned, my soul is aching. I'll die for you once more. But once you hurt me, and I can't forget the pain. The razor blades inside my soul, inside my soul. I tried to forget you, I tried to love you, but I hurt you all the time. I can't forget you, I'm afraid to touch you, and I always see you cry. I tried to forget you, I tried to love you, but I hurt you all the time. I can't forget you, I'm afraid to touch you, and I always see you cry. And I wish I could die with you again. And I wish I could die with you